them apart forever. Catherine Stevens sat anxiously on the edge of her toilet seat, carefully avoiding looking at the plastic stick in her hand. She was 9 days late, and her body felt different in a way she recognized, so she decided it was time to find out for sure. It was only a matter of time, she thought. She and her husband, Ken, never used condoms because she had discovered in her teens that she was allergic to latex. Catherine, or Kate as her friends called her, had tried different forms of birth control over the years, but none worked well for her. The pill made her gain weight and affected her mood, while the ring caused unexpected bleeding. The shot was convenient, but led to allergic reactions that had gotten worse each time she took it. After a severe reaction, Ken had insisted she stop. Kate had tried an IUD before, but the bleeding had been too much to handle, so she had given up on that option too. Eventually, she discarded the pill 6 months ago, and she felt much happier without it. She lost the 15 pounds she had struggled with and felt more confident and lively. Ken noticed the changes in her attitude and was glad to see her happier. The couple agreed to avoid the pill and return to their old method of pulling out, but they hadn't been very good at it, evidenced by their 3 children. Kate was aware of her high fertility. While many of her friends struggled to conceive, she had the opposite experience. It seemed like just a glance from Ken was enough to lead to a baby. For 6 months, they had stopped using contraception, moving from pulling out every time to only on days they thought were safe. Kate's monthly cycle was very regular, lasting 2 to 3 days, with ovulation on day 14. They even joked about it, once drawing up a calendar to track her periods for the entire year. Kate had missed her predicted start date by only 1 day over the whole year. In theory, they thought they were safe. In practice, they often let their desires take over. Both Ken and Kate enjoyed being together fully, and Kate always felt a bit empty when he pulled away. Ken loved to be close to his wife. He often said it felt right to be together in that way. Because of this, they sometimes ignored the importance of being careful. Ken would try to hold back, but Kate would wrap her legs around him, wanting to stay a little longer. With this kind of closeness, it was only a matter of time before they would face a new challenge. Now, here was Kate, 38 years old and a mother of 3. The 3 minutes waiting for the pregnancy test to show its result felt like hours. Finally, the time was up, and she flipped the test over. There it was, a faint but clear second blue line that she expected to see. Baby number 4 was on the way. Now, Kate had to think of a way to tell her husband. Catherine and Kenneth Stevens were a happy couple. They had been married for 16 years and faced many challenges together, from being young and struggling to dealing with demanding jobs. They had 2 boys and 1 girl, ages 12, 9, and 3. Ken worked in IT, and Kate, who had been a nurse, became a stay-at-home mom after their 3rd child. Ken's side business allowed them to make this change, and Kate had mostly been content with her life since. Like many couples, Kate and Ken's relationship had its ups and downs. Early in their marriage, they were very close and loved trying new things together. Over the years, with the responsibilities of work and parenting, that spark faded a bit. Their intimate moments became less frequent and less exciting. However, when Kate stopped taking her birth control pills, everything seemed to change for the better. Kate was always an attractive woman, tall, with lovely curves and beautiful blue eyes. Motherhood had changed her body, but Ken still saw her as beautiful. He had even said she could consider surgery if she wanted, but she felt good about herself just the way she was. Ken was an everyday kind of guy, nothing flashy, just a simple and caring man. Ken, a couple of years older than Kate, stood just under 6 feet tall with an average build, though he had started to notice a bit of softness around the middle. His brown hair was still mostly there, though his hairline was slowly retreating, a reality he had accepted. Turning 40 hadn't changed his hard-working nature. Between his day job and consulting work, Ken often put in long hours, but he never complained. His goal was to provide the best for his family, and that was what kept him going. Kate appreciated his efforts as the main provider and took her role of managing the home and taking care of the kids seriously. She also made sure to look after herself. One of her motivations for stopping birth control had been to shed the last bit of baby weight. Now, with another pregnancy on the way, Kate couldn't help but feel a bit frustrated. She had worked so hard to get back to her pre-pregnancy body, even undergoing a procedure to help with that. But despite her frustration, she vowed to stay active and take good care of herself, determined to keep the changes to her body to a minimum this time around. Later that evening, Kate lay back, completely relaxed but out of breath. She had always appreciated how well Ken knew her and how he always tried to make her feel good. He had a way of making her feel so deeply connected, knowing just what she needed at the right moment. When she asked him to come closer, he moved up, meeting her gaze. Kate reached out to Ken, pulling him closer with a soft smile. The connection between them had always been strong, and tonight was no different. As they shared this intimate moment, their bond deepened, filled with warmth and affection. Ken was attentive and caring, always ensuring that Kate felt loved and cherished. Moments like this reminded them both how much they meant to each other, and their relationship grew stronger with every passing day. They shared a tender kiss, enjoying each other's company. Though they had been through ups and downs over the years, their commitment to each other and their family was unwavering. Together, they knew they could face anything life brought their way, and that was what made their partnership so special. After a moment, she pulled away and looked at him seriously. "I need to tell you something important," she said with a slight smile. He smiled back. "Go ahead, I'm listening." "You're going to be a dad again," she said. "I'm pregnant." Ken's smile grew big. "I thought so," he responded. Kate looked confused. She had thrown the pregnancy test box away in the outside bin, and the test itself was hidden in some towels. How did he know? How? She began to ask. Her husband kissed her softly. "Shh," he said gently. "I'll tell you later. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment." Kate felt a thrill as he held her close. "Don't stop," she urged. Ken was filled with thoughts of a new life growing inside her. As their moment continued, he felt a rush of joy. Later, when they could talk again, Ken explained, "It's not that hard to guess. I had a feeling for a few days now. You taste a bit different when you're pregnant." "What do you mean?" Kate asked. "That doesn't sound real." "It is." He laughed. "I notice it every time. You taste a bit sweeter. It clicked for me a few days ago. I wasn't sure until tonight." Kate shook her head. "That sounds strange. Are you sure you're not just saying that?" Ken smiled. "Nope, it's true. It changes after you have the baby too, but I didn't think you needed to hear all that." Kate looked a bit embarrassed. "Well, I can't really control it, can I?" He chuckled. "No, of course not. I'm just saying it's different." Ken thought about how she felt different too, but he kept that to himself. He didn't want her to worry over small things. "Anyway," he continued, "after our moment tonight, I felt sure. When did you find out?" "Today," she replied. "I was planning to show you the test tonight." She paused, looking a bit unsure. "Are you really okay with this? We hadn't talked much about having another baby." Ken shook his head but smiled. "No, we haven't, but we haven't been really careful either, have we? I think we both understand how babies are made, so it was bound to happen. I'm a bit surprised it happened this month. I thought we were being careful, but the fact that it did happen isn't a shock. So yes, I'm happy. I love you so much. Besides," he added with a playful smile, "I think you look beautiful while expecting. Was I really going to complain about having one more chance for that?" Kate gave him a light punch on the shoulder. "I guess not," she replied. "I love you too." The pregnancy went well. The morning sickness of the first trimester passed, and the second trimester was much easier. During this time, Kate seemed more lively and active. Their relationship remained strong right up to the delivery, with Kate wanting affection and connection as the pregnancy neared its end. Whenever Kate felt uneasy about her changing body, her husband was right there to comfort her. He would gently touch her belly, telling her how lovely she looked, or massage her tired feet. He had always found her beautiful, but it was clear his feelings deepened while she was expecting. Eventually, they talked about their future. While they both cherished having kids, they felt that 4 was enough. They had thought they were done after their second child, and again after their third. Now, after their 4th, they agreed it was the right time to stop. They didn't want Kate to deal with any more effects from birth control, and they weren't interested in using condoms. They considered other options that might be better but felt detached when it came to using them. There was something meaningful for both of them about being close without barriers, and they wanted to avoid the hassle and discomfort of condoms. So they decided that Ken would have the procedure to ensure they wouldn't have any more surprises. Insurance would cover it, and with Kate recovering from the delivery, he could take a few days to rest with some ice packs while spending time with their new baby. Afterward, there would be no more worries about unexpected pregnancies or the issues that come with birth control. At first, it seemed everything went according to plan. Kate delivered a healthy baby girl and returned home without any problems. Ken had a quick procedure and some time to recover. About 6 weeks later, they felt ready to reconnect, thinking only a little time remained until worries about pregnancy would be behind them. Well, maybe reconnected is a strong way to describe it. Ken and Kate were excited about reconnecting, but Kate soon realized that her body felt different after the baby was born. She struggled with discomfort during intimacy and didn't feel comfortable asking for help. This situation made it hard for both of them to enjoy closeness, as Ken did not want to cause her any pain. Then, Kate experienced feelings of sadness that overwhelmed her. She felt tired all the time, like a zombie. After having 3 easy babies, number 4 was quite a handful, constantly crying and keeping her up at night. Taking care of herself became hard, and sometimes even simple tasks felt impossible. Ken took on many household chores, but working 2 jobs left him exhausted too. They were both struggling to keep up. Kate also felt a deep sadness as she realized this was her last baby. She felt a sense of loss, even though she didn't actually want another child. The knowledge that she couldn't have more made her feel as if something important was missing from her life. Because of all this, their closeness changed dramatically. They went from being very intimate almost every day to only once every 1 or 2 weeks. When they did connect, it felt less meaningful. Ken noticed that Kate seemed distracted and not fully engaged. Their time together felt more like a chore rather than something to enjoy. There was little playfulness, and Kate had lost interest in exploring new things together. Most of the time, she would simply say something direct to Ken, and the experience felt routine. That was how their relationship shifted, and for over a year, this new normal continued. There were a few moments when Ken glimpsed the old spark in Kate, but they were rare. There were times when she let him show her affection, moments when she would kiss him and make him feel appreciated. But these times became rare and eventually stopped altogether. Ken tried to stay hopeful and patient, but it was hard when it felt like his feelings didn't matter. It was bound to happen eventually. One late Saturday night, when their baby was almost 16 months old, Kate walked in on her husband watching something inappropriate. As usual, Kate was very tired and fell asleep with the baby before 9 o'clock. It was Ken's job to put the kids to bed, which took longer on weekends. For once, Ken felt energized afterward and wasn't ready to sleep. It had been 2 weeks since they had their last intimate moment, and he had hoped for a little connection that night. But it just didn't happen. He felt a strong urge for closeness, so Ken quietly moved to the living room. After making sure everyone else was settled and asleep, he decided to watch something to help relieve his tension. He was so focused that he didn't notice Kate coming down the hall until she spoke. "Ken, what are you doing?" she asked, her sleepiness fading away. Are you watching that stuff?" Ken felt embarrassed. He knew Kate had a strong opinion against such material. She often viewed it as betrayal. He hadn't watched it much before, but with their relationship changing over the past year, he turned to it more often. Now she had caught him red-handed. Clearing his throat, he put away his phone and straightened up as best as he could. "Yes, Kate," he replied, trying to keep his tone calm. "I was watching something." Kate gasped and hurried back down the hall, leaving him alone in the dark. "Why didn't I just go to the bathroom?" he thought. "I should have done something to let her know not to come in." Ken stood up, planning to go to the bedroom and apologize to Kate. But as he moved, he suddenly didn't feel like saying sorry. What did I actually do wrong? He wondered. When he reached the bedroom, he felt embarrassed and upset. He found Kate there, tears in her eyes. "How could you?" she asked. "You know how I feel about this? Why didn't you just come to me?" Ken exhaled slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're right. I do understand how you feel about certain things, Kate. But just because you feel something doesn't mean it's the only truth. Kate was surprised. She expected an emotional apology, not this. Before she could say anything, he continued. You think that it's wrong? He said. But everyone knows that cheating involves two people. I'm watching something for enjoyment, not because I want to be with that specific person. I can't be cheating with someone who doesn't even know me. He paused for a moment. And why didn't I just talk to you? Ken chuckled without humor. You know that if I had come to you, you would have made me feel like something was wrong with me. It seems like you see our time together as just a task to complete since the baby was born. After the baby, it felt like you turned off that part of yourself to focus on being a mom. So no, I wasn't going to come to you to pressure you into something you didn't want to do. Kate was at a loss for words, but Ken continued before she could reply. I've been very patient with you, Kate, because I care about you. You haven't enjoyed our time together for a while. I know you're trying, and I appreciate that. But just because your feelings changed doesn't mean mine have. I've always wanted more than you, but I've never pushed you, even when you seemed less interested. I haven't tried to start anything lately because it only seemed to cause issues. I choose to be okay with the moments we share when you choose to share them. I haven't complained about how things have changed, but tonight, I wanted to use my imagination and remember how it felt to be close with someone who wanted it too. I miss that. Ken looked at Kate seriously. I'm sorry if this surprised you. I'm sorry you feel bad, but I haven't done anything wrong here. I've respected you and given you space, but I still have feelings too. I won't apologize for finding ways to fulfill those feelings. Just then, the baby started to cry. Ken moved toward the nursery. Don't worry, I'll take care of her, he said. Try to rest, Kate. We can talk more tomorrow. It took most of the following day for them to feel ready, but that evening, after putting the kids to bed, they finally talked. Kate shared her feelings. She opened up about her sadness, her sense of loss, and her worries about being a mother. She told Ken about her pain and how she had pulled away from him. She talked about her sadness and how it led her to avoid being close to him. Ken knew some of this already, but it surprised him to hear about her thoughts on having children since the idea of a vasectomy had been hers. He also shared his feelings, telling her how much he missed their closeness and affection. He opened up about feeling alone and unappreciated. They both cried and held each other. They talked for a long time. Kate wanted to understand Ken's use of adult content better. Ken chose to be very honest. He admitted it wasn't the first time he had watched such videos. He explained that what drew him in was the idea of a woman who wanted and enjoyed being close to someone, not the person herself. He was taken aback when Kate began asking specific questions. Can you show me the video you were watching? She asked. At first, he hesitated, but then he thought, why not? And found it. Kate was surprised. She expected to see a flashy production with a model who looked very perfect. Instead, the video featured an ordinary-looking woman, maybe a few years older than them, in a dimly lit setting, being intimate with a man who seemed just as regular. I don't get it, Kate said, confused. She doesn't look perfect. This is what you like. Ken nodded, hoping Kate didn't notice his reaction. Yeah, it is. You see, she's just a normal woman. It's not really about how she looks. What matters is that she seems to really enjoy the moment. In the video, a voice spoke to the woman, likely from the cameraman, and the way they spoke showed they were married. It was clear he was watching his wife be intimate with another man. Kate felt a mix of curiosity and uncertainty as she explored this new topic. So, does that excite you too, knowing she's with someone else? Ken took a deep breath and decided to be completely clear. Yes, it does. I find professional content pretty dull. It feels fake when everything is just acting. What really interests me is watching genuine moments where real women enjoy being close, especially if they are married but with someone else. That makes it more thrilling. Kate shook her head. Please turn it off, she said softly. Worried he might have gone too far, Ken quickly followed his wife's request. To his surprise, she leaned in and kissed him deeply, and soon they were close, wrapped in each other's embrace. Ken noticed a spark in Kate that he hadn't felt in some time, and their connection that night felt stronger than it had in months. A couple of nights later, after their kids were asleep, Kate approached Ken in their bedroom. We need to talk, she said. Ken braced himself. He knew that conversations starting with those words often didn't lead to good news. But instead of an argument or a serious issue, Kate surprised him again. She had made a decision to change things. "You were right," she began, speaking plainly. Ken raised an eyebrow. "I was right. I should record this moment," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. Kate gave him a playful nudge on the shoulder, but kept going. "Don't be silly. I mean it. I've been so wrapped up in my own thoughts and being a mom that I forgot about us. You've been picking up the slack, cooking, cleaning, working, and I just let it happen. It wasn't fair." Ken opened his mouth to respond, but she quickly stopped him. "No, don't argue. It's true. You were right about a lot of things. I don't like some stuff, but it's not realistic for me to expect you to just not need attention or affection. I'm sorry." Ken was caught off guard. This conversation wasn't at all what he had anticipated. I don't know what to say." Kate shook her head gently. "You don't need to say anything. I just want you to know that I'm going to do better. I love you, and I've always found you attractive. I just lost sight of that for a while. But now," she said softly as she moved closer to him, "I'm going to make sure we're a priority again." Their relationship had always been strong, but now it felt like they were reconnecting on a deeper level. Both Kate and Ken understood that it wasn't just about the everyday routines, they needed to focus on each other too. From that night on, they promised to be more attentive to one another, making sure their partnership stayed strong amidst the chaos of life. She kissed him deeply, and he eagerly kissed her back. It was a sweet moment, especially after everything they had just shared. As they continued to kiss, Ken felt his wife moving closer, and he gently turned her onto her back, kissing down her body. He thought she might stop him like she usually did, but instead, she welcomed him with open arms. Over the next couple of months, Kate kept her promise and then some. Their intimate moments became a regular part of their days. They shared many experiences together, from simple cuddling to exploring new games and toys they had found. They even tried some things they hadn't done in a long time, and Ken felt a new sense of freedom in their relationship. He no longer worried about special precautions, and it felt good. Kate opened up and shared things she had kept to herself for years. She encouraged Ken to talk about his dreams, and they discovered new interests together. They even watched films together, laying in bed and enjoying the scenes they both felt comfortable in a way they hadn't before. Their connection felt stronger than ever, even compared to their early days together. Kate experienced more pleasure in those 2 months than she had in years. Even on her usual tough days, she still made the effort to connect with him in different ways, surprising Ken with her newfound enthusiasm. One evening after their time together, Kate spoke up about something that had been on her mind. "Ken," she said, "I've noticed a pattern in the videos you watch. It seems clear you prefer ones with married women and other men." Ken paused, unprepared for this conversation. He had grown accustomed to Kate's old views on such things and was unsure how to respond. "You're right. I enjoy seeing real moments of connection between people," he finally admitted. Kate frowned slightly. "I understand, but it's more than that. You always seem to look for specific kinds of videos. A lot of them involve white women and black men, and many include the man finishing inside the woman. Is there a reason for that?" He cleared his throat, realizing she was curious. "Yes, you're correct," he nodded, feeling the importance of their open discussion. "I think it's mostly about the excitement of doing something that feels forbidden. A wife being a bit wild, she wants more than just what her husband can offer and is open to new experiences with others. It's like she's free-spirited and seeking pleasure without much care for what others think." He paused for a moment. The idea of mixed races adds a layer of excitement. It's a striking contrast, and it feels daring when she openly shares her desires, no matter how others might react. And the thought of her being so open to intimacy with different partners can feel thrilling and somewhat risky. Kate thought about what he said. "I can see how that might be relatable," she replied. "There's an attraction in the contrast. The idea that something considered forbidden can be more enticing. Risky? That's quite a strong feeling." She stopped to reflect. "You've mentioned before how fantasy plays a big role in your interests. You like to visualize being with someone who has those adventurous feelings. So, Do you ever think about me being with other men in that way? Ken felt a warmth in his cheeks. He considered brushing it off, but he knew his wife was too perceptive for that. Yes, he admitted slowly. That's what adds to the excitement. It's one thing to see someone enjoying that kind of closeness, but imagining it's you is even more thrilling. Seeing that he had more to say, Kate patiently waited. Years ago, he continued, we explored some new experiences together. I'll always remember how captivating you looked when you shared that closeness with someone else. It felt like I was watching my own personal story with the most beautiful woman. No one compares to you, truly. I got to see you in a way that's unique and special. Those memories are vivid for me, and yes, I do think about you in that way. I understand, she replied softly. Thank you for being honest with me. I need some time to process this. She nestled closer to her husband, signaling the end of their talk. A few days later, Kate wanted to discuss it again. Ken felt a bit anxious, but much less than before. Their open conversations had brought about positive changes so far. Ken, I've been thinking a lot about what you said regarding fantasies. I thought it was important to share my feelings with you, Kate began. Ken nodded. That seems fair. For the last few months, I have tried to open up, Kate explained. I realized I had pushed down parts of myself that I didn't want to hide. Work, kids, and life took up so much time. I see now that you are a wonderful husband, and you deserve a happy love life. Just because you want to be intimate more than I do, it doesn't mean I don't also want a satisfying relationship. Ken nodded again. You really have, he said. Honestly, I didn't expect this change at all, but I'm glad it's happening. Kate smiled. I'm happy you feel that way. I feel the same. But about your wishes and what you imagine. She paused, and Ken felt uneasy. I remember we had some experiences with others a while back, she continued. I think those were actually your suggestion, Ken replied. She nodded. Yes, they were, and I enjoyed them. We were young when we got together, and I wanted to explore and experience new things without hurting you. Ken frowned a little at that. He recalled those times when Kate suggested an experience with someone else. He wasn't on board at first, but he loved her and wanted her to be happy, so he tried it and found a side of himself he hadn't known before. But, my love, she continued, I've moved past those feelings. I've never really gone back to them. I love you and our family. I don't want anyone else. I'm happy to be with you. Ken sighed. I know you have, he said. He looked at the ceiling for a moment before speaking again. Honestly, it was tough for me. I never wanted to share you in the first place. You had to convince me to try it. Kate started to speak, but Ken held up his hand. I'm not looking for an apology. The first time was really frightening for me. It made me feel uneasy, but at the same time, it was exciting. I remember how passionate things were between us afterward. He shook his head. I ended up wanting more of that. It became a big curiosity for me after we tried it a couple of times. When you wanted to stop, I agreed, of course. Then we started having kids, and all that was set aside. I dreamed for a long time about going back to those experiences. It took me far too long to realize that when you said a break, you meant not again. It wasn't easy to let go of that thought. Ken looked at his wife seriously. I love you. I respect your wishes. I've said a few times that I would like to try some things again, but I've never pushed you to do anything. In fact, I haven't even brought it up in years because I respect how you feel. Kate sighed. Thank you for understanding. We tried it and we had fun, but that's not the person I want to be. I don't mind watching a little adult content with you now and then, or some playful talk sometimes. I know fantasies are important to you in ways I might not grasp. I just don't fantasize like you do. I really want to be a good partner and make our time together special for you, but I don't want to be with anyone else again. Ken felt a lump in his throat, a deep sense of sadness. He had sensed she felt this way, but it hurt to have his last bit of hope dashed. He had never brought it up to her, but he had enjoyed the thought of it happening again, no matter how unlikely. But that was over now. I understand, he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. I love you. I would never want you to do anything you don't want to do. Thank you, she said softly. I love you too. They held each other, and the conversation came to an end. Weeks passed. Kate mostly kept their relationship a priority. Sometimes, she seemed to go through the motions, almost like she was ticking off a checklist, but she quickly adjusted when she noticed it. Overall, their relationship felt different, and their connection remained strong. True to her word, Kate still watched some adult content with Ken. Sometimes she would make comments about his fantasies, like how the characters were enjoying situations that didn't involve their own partners. She would encourage Ken to express his thoughts while they watched, or even when they were close. Ken appreciated these moments, but he remained cautious. He didn't want to push the issue and was trying not to depend too much on those fantasies. Occasionally, Kate would notice a hint of sadness in his tone when they talked about these things, but Ken was careful not to voice any complaints. For some reason, Kate sometimes brought up the topic suddenly, even when things were calm. She would ask him if he really wanted to visit those ideas again. He always answered that yes, he did, but he understood and respected her wishes. They often had talks where she would ask her husband about his thoughts and feelings, and she would explain that she no longer wanted certain things. Each time he would say he understood and would respect her wishes, and she would thank him. Ken, on the other hand, was puzzled by Kate's questions. They had discussed it in detail before. Did she think he was going to change his mind? Did she expect him to suddenly say he wanted things to go back to how they were? It confused him. Weeks turned into months. About 4 months had passed since Kate had surprised him with a bold gesture, and their relationship had remained active and engaging since then. Ken felt refreshed in their connection. They talked more, shared their wishes, thoughts, and feelings openly. He and his wife seemed to be getting along better, and he felt overall happiness in their lives. It had been weeks since Kate had mentioned his previous thoughts, and Ken was glad to leave it behind. But that night she brought it up again. "Hey," she said playfully, "do you think about me with other men often?" Ken frowned slightly. "Kate, why does it matter? You've said how you feel about it. I respect that you don't want to explore it anymore. I haven't brought it up once you always do." She continued lightly as she spoke. "I know that, Ken, but I just want to know. Do you think about it a lot?" Ken was frustrated at the thought of discussing this again. But feeling a bit annoyed, he decided to be straightforward. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes, I think about it a lot. I've tried not to, really. It's just my favorite thought, so it's hard to set it aside." He took a breath. "I think about what it would be like to see you with someone else. But it's just a thought. I accept that. Can we focus on what we can enjoy together instead?" She paused and looked him in the eye. "But what if there was a way?" she asked with interest. Ken was taken aback, unsure how to respond. "What do you mean?" he managed to reply. Kate sighed. "I see that you might not be truly happy without exploring this. You've always supported me in everything else." She hesitated for a moment. "What I mean is that you've carried this for years. I may not have realized how much it meant to you. And that's mostly my fault. I made a choice long ago without thinking about your feelings, and when you finally talked about them, I ignored what you said. That wasn't fair to you." She took a deep breath and continued. "I'm not saying I want to change our lives completely. I'm not looking for clubs or big parties. I'm not promising anything beyond one meeting. But I really do want to give it a genuine try. Is that fair?" Ken sat still, feeling like the room was spinning around him. He had wanted this for many years, hoping it would happen again, and even convincing himself that it wouldn't. Just a few months ago, he thought his hopes were lost. And now his wife was offering to make those dreams come true. He realized that his wife was watching him closely, waiting for his answer. He swallowed hard and managed to reply, That seems fair." And just like that, they started their new journey. Before the night ended, they found themselves online looking at discussion forums. They signed up for a few sites, posted some photos, and, predictably, started receiving messages almost immediately. To Kate's surprise, there were many men eager to connect with a woman in her 40s, and many of them were younger than she had expected. They saw that a lot of the messages were poorly thought out. One could say they were a bit overwhelming. But even this type of attention made Kate feel surprisingly good. It was nice to realize there were men out there who found her attractive. That night, they shared an intimate moment that was much louder than Kate usually would be, and it was clear to both of them that, despite any doubts about meeting someone new, part of her was really excited about it. After talking for a couple of weeks, The couple found a man who lived a few towns away. He seemed clean-cut, handsome, and had interesting things to say. He had recent health tests, though he claimed he had never been with a married couple before, and boasted quite a bit. Kate insisted she didn't care about size, but Ken thought it could be fun. After more conversations, they arranged for Grandma to watch the kids the following Saturday, which felt like a safe day for Kate, and booked a hotel room for their meeting. The days leading up to the meeting felt very slow, but finally, Saturday arrived, and Ken felt nervous butterflies in his stomach. He had thought about this for a long time, but how would it really be? This man was bigger than him. Would Kim actually like him more for that? How would she feel about him afterward? Threesomes in your 20s were one thing, but in your 40s, with kids and so many years together, was this a mistake? Maybe it would be better to keep this as just a secret fantasy. But if Ken had some nerves, his wife had a lot more. She was a mother of 4 at 40 years old. What if the man thought she wasn't attractive? What if he was let down by how she looked in person? What if she wasn't as skilled as she thought? What if what worked for Ken didn't work this time? Kate found herself pacing around the house, feeling anxious. When it was time to get ready, she wasn't sure what to wear. Eventually, she chose a pretty set of matching underwear, a nice blouse, and one of Ken's favorite pairs of fitted jeans. Even though it was only early afternoon, she decided to have a drink, then another while she put on her clothes and did her makeup. When Ken saw her, his jaw almost dropped. "Wow," he said. "You look amazing. It's a shame those clothes won't stay on for long." Kate laughed and playfully hit his shoulder. "You have to say that, I'm your wife," she replied. Ken shook his head. "No way. You really look great. Any man would love the chance to be with you." Kate rolled her eyes. "You know how to flatter me," she said, though Ken noticed her cheeks were a little red. As their grandma finished gathering the kids for goodbyes, Ken went to the kitchen and grabbed a big drink cup. He mixed a strong cocktail for Kate to help with her nerves. They had talked about picking up some drinks on the way, but Ken thought it would be good to have something stronger just in case Kate needed it to relax. Once the goodbyes were said, the couple hopped in the car and started driving. They had an hour ahead of them, and since Kate looked nervous, Ken decided to play their favorite music to lighten the mood. They tried to chat a little, but it didn't go well. About 30 minutes into the drive, Kate couldn't wait anymore. She opened the top of the cup and took a sip of her drink. She laughed at Ken's surprised look. "No one can tell what I'm having," she said, "and I could use something to calm me down. I can't believe how anxious I am." Ken shook his head. "You really don't need to be worried. You look so amazing." Despite what her husband thought, Kate kept drinking. By the time they stopped at a gas station near their hotel, she had finished her drink and was feeling carefree. "I need to go to the bathroom," she said firmly. Ken laughed and went inside to buy some drinks for later. From her actions, it seemed like Kate had moved past tipsy and was nearly drunk. He had never thought she would drink so much so quickly. Still, she seemed much more relaxed about their plan now, so he didn't mind. A cheerful Kate returned from the restroom and they quickly drove to the hotel. She fidgeted nervously in the car while Ken went in to check in. Soon, he came back with a room key and a smile. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. Kate sighed dramatically. "As ready as I can be," she replied. They entered the room, adjusted the air conditioning to a comfortable setting, and looked at each other. Ken checked his phone as he put the drinks in the mini fridge. Then he turned on a playlist of upbeat alternative rock music. "He's not supposed to be here for another 20 minutes, he mentioned. Kate nodded and stepped closer to him. "Maybe we can find a way to pass the time," she suggested, leaning in closer. Ken felt a jolt of excitement at her closeness. He turned to kiss her, tasting the sweetness of her drink. Kate was leaning against him, and the chemistry between them was electric. She took his hand and gave him a playful look. "Wow," Ken said, surprised by how enthusiastic Kate was. The energy in the room was palpable. He smiled. "Someone seems a little excited," he said softly. Instead of her usual quiet reply, Kate surprised him with a straightforward answer. "I'm a bit nervous," she admitted, "but I really want to be close to you." She moved closer again. Ken laughed. "Whoa there! Our friend will be here soon. You don't want to start without him, do you?" "Come on," she said with a playful pout. "You're not going to make me wait, are you?" Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door, making Kate jump slightly. "I guess that's him?" she whispered, her eyes wide. Ken could see the mix of nerves and excitement on her face. Reluctantly, he stepped away and opened the door to welcome a man who was a bit taller and broader than him. The newcomer smiled, brushed back his brown hair, and extended a friendly hand. Ken was greeted with a friendly smile. "You must be Ken," the man said as they shook hands. He then turned his attention to the woman in the room. "And you must be Kate," he added, offering a warm introduction. "I'm Tom," he said, stepping away from Ken to give Kate a friendly hug. "Wow," Tom said softly. "You're even more beautiful in person." Kate blushed slightly but smiled, her body language showing she was warming up to the situation. Ken could see that she was quickly getting comfortable with Tom's presence. They exchanged small talk for a few minutes, discussing things like the drive, traffic, and the weather, but it was clear that no one was truly focused on the conversation. Tom glanced at Ken before moving closer to Kate. She smiled, a little unsure of what was about to happen, as he leaned in and gave her a light kiss. Kate hesitated for a moment, glancing at her husband. Seeing Ken watching with a calm expression, she relaxed and allowed herself to respond to the kiss. The kiss felt unfamiliar to Kate, different from what she was used to. Her thoughts were mixed, part of her feeling nervous, while another part felt curious about the new experience. Tom stepped back and gently reached for the hem of Kate's blouse, lifting it up slowly. Without much thought, Kate raised her arms and her blouse was soon removed. Tom's gaze lingered for a moment before they continued talking and connecting. Kate glanced at Ken again, seeing him observing the moment closely, which gave her the confidence to continue. As they shared another kiss, Kate began unbuttoning Tom's shirt, revealing a well-built chest beneath. They embraced once more, sharing a moment of closeness. Tom's hands rested gently on her back, and Kate found herself feeling more comfortable with the situation, knowing her husband was there, supporting her. The next moment, Kate found herself standing close to Tom, their bodies pressed together. They shared a brief but intense connection, lost in the moment. As they held each other, Ken stood nearby, observing quietly. Kate glanced at him, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. The three of them, caught up in the atmosphere, continued to interact with one another, exchanging brief touches and looks. Ken remained watchful, feeling a mixture of emotions, but he stayed composed. The room was filled with a quiet tension, with each person feeling the weight of the situation. Kate smiled at both men, clearly enjoying the attention. Tom, too, responded warmly, but the mood stayed light, without any further escalation. As the minutes passed, they continued to enjoy each other's company in a friendly, respectful way, and the evening went on with a sense of curiosity and adventure. Eventually, they all decided to call it a night, understanding that their bond as a couple was strong, and this unique experience had brought them even closer. Ken and Kate left the room with a deeper connection and appreciation for one another, grateful for the moment they had shared. Ken, feeling the excitement of the moment, decided to take a step back to clear his mind. He quickly removed the rest of his clothes and stood behind his wife, trying to stay present in the moment. As both men were nearly undressed, Ken noticed Kate still had her jeans on. While she was focused on Tom, Ken gently began to unbutton her jeans and slid them down slowly. He took a brief moment to appreciate her, feeling connected to her in that intimate moment. As Ken helped her out of her jeans, his attention shifted to how they were all caught up in the situation. Despite everything happening, he couldn't help but focus on the bond between them, knowing that this experience was different from anything they'd shared before. Ken leaned close to Kate and softly whispered, "Take a moment. Let's focus on what we want." His words were calm and steady, reminding her that they were in this together. Kate paused, considering his words, and shifted her focus. Tom, too, sensed the change in the room. The mood lightened, and they all felt the shared connection between them deepen. Ken and Kate shared a look, silently agreeing to take a step back from the intensity and enjoy the closeness of their relationship. They understood that the night was about exploring new territory while staying grounded in their commitment to each other. Together, they moved forward, appreciating the moment for what it was, an experience that brought them closer in a new way. The evening ended on a note of trust and understanding. leaving Ken and Kate feeling more connected than ever before. They knew that no matter what, they could face anything together, strengthened by the deep bond they shared. Ken, focused on the moment, gently adjusted his touch, causing Kate to respond to his movements. He remained calm, keeping himself from getting too caught up, as he was still on edge. Tom's breathing grew louder, and it was clear to everyone in the room that he was close to his peak. Kate, fully aware, maintained her focus. Tom let out a series of sharp sounds as he reached his limit, while Kate continued without hesitation, remaining composed as the situation unfolded. Ken observed quietly, his attention fully on Kate. He was caught up in the intensity of the moment, watching as his wife maintained her poise and focus. When it was all over, Kate sat back and turned to Ken with a playful look. She stood up, leaned into him, and smiled softly. Ken made a light-hearted comment, teasing her about the moment they had shared, and Kate responded with a gentle laugh. As they exchanged a few words, Ken was still processing everything. Kate leaned in and gave him a deep kiss. Though Ken felt a slight hesitation, his connection with his wife overpowered any lingering thoughts. He allowed himself to enjoy the moment, appreciating the closeness they shared. As their kiss ended, Ken felt his head spinning, still trying to make sense of everything. Kate stepped away with a smile and mentioned she needed a quick break. Before heading to the bathroom, she playfully asked Ken to grab her a drink from the fridge. Ken, still feeling the effects of the evening, complied, heading to the mini-fridge to get the lemonade. Tom was still lounging on the bed while Ken retrieved a bottle from the mini-fridge. As Ken opened it, he tried to ignore the odd feeling of being in the room with another man, especially with everything quiet now. Kate soon returned, took the drink, and walked over to the bed. Ken couldn't help but notice how confident she seemed, a side of her that hadn't shown often, especially since she had been self-conscious about her body after the baby. But today, she carried herself with a newfound confidence, and Ken couldn't disagree with that. Kate said playfully, looking around the room. It seems like no one is ready to join me yet. She sighed dramatically, pretending to pout. What will we do until then? She took a long sip before setting the bottle on the bedside table. Tom, still relaxed, wrapped an arm around Kate and gently pulled her down next to him on the bed. I'm sure we can think of something, he said with a grin, leaning in for a kiss. Ken, watching this unfold, felt a bit of unease. Though he wanted Kate to enjoy herself, seeing her so comfortable with someone else made him pause. He knew it was all part of the moment, but witnessing his wife interacting with someone so casually was different than what he'd imagined. A soft sound from Kate brought him back to the present. Tom had pulled away from the kiss and was now holding her close. Kate, seemingly at ease, leaned into the situation and the room grew quiet again as they shared a moment together. Ken stayed nearby, observing quietly. He reminded himself that this experience was about openness, trust, and sharing something new, even though it felt unfamiliar. The night continued as the three of them navigated their emotions, finding new ways to connect while respecting the strong bond that had always existed between Ken and Kate. Ken watched as his wife Kate reacted intensely. Her hands gripped the bedspread tightly, and her body trembled. She arched her back, responding to Tom's movements, her breaths coming in quick bursts. Her face showed the depth of her emotions, as she seemed to lose herself in the moment. Suddenly, Kate let out a loud, almost uncontrollable moan. Oh my God, she cried out, her voice filled with emotion. Tom spoke softly to her, encouraging her as she continued to experience the overwhelming sensations. Normally, Ken knew that his wife didn't like the nickname Katie, but in this moment, she was too caught up in what was happening to care. As the moment built, Ken noticed a change in Kate. Her body shook, and before long, a sudden release occurred. A wave of emotion and energy passed through her as she let go, clearly overwhelmed by the experience. Ken was surprised, knowing that this level of intensity had always been rare for Kate, something that required just the right mix of relaxation and care. Yet here she was, responding so powerfully. Tom, clearly pleased with himself, gave Kate a brief moment to catch her breath before continuing. Ken noticed that Kate seemed almost startled by the quick return to the earlier intensity, and he could see her struggling to keep up. The room was filled with a mix of emotions, but Ken stayed focused, trying to process everything happening around him. As Kate's body responded again, Ken watched closely, still trying to understand how quickly everything had escalated. The experience was unlike anything they had ever shared before, leaving him feeling both amazed and unsure. Within a short time, Kate was overwhelmed by the sensations again, clearly reacting to Tom's persistent actions. Ken stood in disbelief, watching as Kate experienced something entirely new for her. Tom alternated between brief pauses and continuing to intensify the experience, repeating the cycle a few times. Each time, Kate responded quickly, expressing a mixture of pleasure and exhaustion, asking for a break after the fourth round. Kate, clearly exhausted, softly pleaded, "Please, no more, I'm done." She turned onto her side, trying to catch her breath. Tom, with a grin, made a lighthearted comment. "You've been amazing, Kate, but I don't think the hotel staff is going to like this mess." Ken felt somewhat detached from the moment, unsure of how to process what had just happened. His wife had just gone through an intense experience that was unlike anything they had shared before. It left him with mixed feelings, part awe and part uncertainty. Seeing that Kate was worn out, Ken moved beside her and gently whispered, "Are you okay?" Kate turned to look at him, slowly regaining her composure. "I'm more than okay," she replied with a tired smile. "I've never experienced anything like that." Her response left Ken feeling a mix of emotions. While it was exciting to see her in such a new light, it also made him question the intensity of what had just happened. Despite the swirl of emotions, he still felt drawn to her. Ken joined her on the bed, feeling the need to connect. Tom gave a nod of approval, stepping back to give them space. Ken gently encouraged Kate to lie back, positioning himself above her, mindful of her comfort. He focused on being close to her, appreciating the bond they shared. Although Ken was still processing everything, his focus was on being with his wife, ensuring that they remained connected in this moment. Despite everything, they found their way back to each other, reaffirming their bond in the quiet aftermath of an intense experience. As Ken and Kate shared a close moment, he marveled at how connected they felt. He moved with care, focusing on each movement, wanting to ensure she was comfortable and enjoying the experience. Kate responded positively, and Ken noticed the warmth in her expression, the way her face flushed with emotion, something he had always loved about her when she was deeply engaged. Out of the corner of his eye, Ken noticed Tom approaching, moving closer. Without a word, Kate turned to acknowledge him, but the focus remained on the shared moment between her and Ken. They were all navigating a new experience, but the mutual respect and care were evident as they moved forward together. As things progressed, Kate's initial tiredness seemed to fade. She became more involved, clearly wanting to share the experience with both men, her energy picking up as they continued. The atmosphere was charged, but everyone remained mindful of one another, moving in sync with the unspoken understanding that they were all trying something new and unique. Eventually, Tom suggested a change in position. Kate looked at Ken for reassurance, and with a nod, he encouraged her to continue. The bond between Ken and Kate remained strong, even as they explored these new dynamics together. Everyone took their time, ensuring that the experience was positive and respectful, keeping the focus on connection rather than rushing anything. Throughout the evening, Ken remained deeply focused on his wife, appreciating how their relationship had grown to this point of trust and openness. They had entered new territory together, and though it was different from anything they had done before, the trust between them remained at the center of everything. Ken moved aside to make space, but to his surprise, Tom lay back on the bed near Kate instead of positioning himself as Ken had expected. "Hey, man," Ken asked. "Aren't you going to join in?" Tom gave a relaxed grin but shook his head. "Maybe in a bit. Your wife is amazing, and I wouldn't mind a little more of her attention if that's okay with you both." Ken, somewhat caught off guard, nodded. He couldn't deny how drawn he was to his wife, who seemed to be at ease and enjoying the moment. Still, Ken had imagined things would go differently, expecting Tom to be more involved in a different way. A small part of him felt relieved not to have the complexity of watching someone else with his wife. But at the same time, he had anticipated something else from the experience. Kate, meanwhile, leaned forward, returning her attention to Tom as he had requested. She was comfortable, moving gracefully, and Ken couldn't help but appreciate the moment they were all sharing. When Ken hesitated, she glanced back at him with a playful look, urging him to rejoin her. Ken couldn't resist and moved closer, focusing on his connection with Kate. What followed was a continuation of their shared experience, with everyone fully engaged, but in their own way. Kate's enjoyment was clear, and as the moment unfolded, Ken felt a deep sense of connection to her. The three of them navigated this unique situation with a sense of trust and understanding, making sure that everyone was comfortable and involved. As things slowed down, Ken appreciated the closeness he felt to his wife, knowing that they had entered new territory together while maintaining their bond. It was a shared adventure, but one that ultimately brought Ken and Kate closer, reinforcing the trust and openness between them. Soon, the sensations became overwhelming, and Ken moved as deeply as he could with his wife. He felt a release, and once those strong feelings began to fade, he leaned back, causing their connection to break. He was pleased to see a small amount of fluid at the opening of Kate's body. As she started to sit up, he watched it slip out and fall onto the bedspread. It didn't seem like a big deal given all the other little messes on the bed. Tom got up from the bed to visit the bathroom, and Kate sat up. She smiled at Ken, who looked at her with her makeup faded, hair tousled, and a surprised expression. He felt amazed at how attractive she looked. "I've decided," he said. "You have never looked more beautiful." She laughed. "You are so silly," she replied. He shook his head. "I mean it. That was incredible. Only someone foolish wouldn't find you beautiful right now." The toilet flushed, and Tom returned to the bedroom, gathering his clothes. "Thank you both so much," he said. "I had a fantastic time. Miss Katie here," he gestured, "is really talented." Kate appeared a bit shy and unsure of what to say, so Ken jumped in. "She's definitely amazing, I agree." He glanced at Tom's clothes. "Are you finished?" he asked. Tom nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. I can't remember the last time I participated like that. It would take me a while to be ready again." After putting on his shirt and pants, Tom sat down to tie his shoes. By the time Tom had his shoes on, Ken had put on his boxers, and Kate had slipped into her blouse. Tom smiled at them both, shook Ken's hand, and gave Kate a gentle kiss. "Thanks again," he said before leaving the hotel room and closing the door behind him. The couple's first experience together with a friend since before their children were born was complete. Later that night, the couple lay in bed together. Kate was obviously tired, but they both felt it was important to reconnect after the day's events. Their time together had started slow and gentle, but they had picked up the pace and intensity as it went on. Ken had talked about how attractive Kate looked with someone else, saying it was impressive to see her so excited. They enjoyed their time together and talked afterward. "So, how did it feel for you?" Kate asked. "I loved it," Ken replied. "Did it match your dreams? Was it what you imagined?" she asked. Ken smiled. "You were everything I dreamed of. I can't believe how enthusiastic you were." Kate smiled softly. "I'm sorry I didn't go all the way with him. I wanted to see if I was good enough to make him happy," she said. "But the second time was all about him. I thought you both would want to be with me," she added. Ken nodded. "I know, and I wished for that too. I really appreciate you doing this for me." "Well," she said slowly, "some people say you should try things twice to see if the first time was a fluke. Maybe not going all the way with him counts as that. Do you think we should try again?" Ken felt a wave of excitement. "Yes, I'd love to try again," he replied. The next day, Tom sent them a message online. He thanked them again and mentioned how much he enjoyed his time with Kate. Then he revealed that it was his first time being unfaithful, which was why he hadn't gone further with Kate. He explained that his wife usually didn't want to be intimate with him. They had thought Tom was single, so discovering he had a wife surprised and upset both of them. By the end of the message, Kate was ready to express her frustration, but Tom said he would be closing his account and wished them well. With that, the Stevenses started their search for a new partner. After some challenges, they found a new man named Craig. He assured them he was not married. He had been divorced for over a year. He was friendly and easy to talk to. After lots of discussions, they planned a meeting 4 weeks after meeting Tom. Kate and Ken agreed that having meetings about once a month would make them special and enjoyable, while still keeping interest alive in between. With Kate's regular 28-day cycle, they felt comfortable that they were meeting at a good time. However, this month, Kate's period arrived a day early. This was only the second time in 4 years her cycle had varied, but since one day usually didn't change much, both Ken and Kate felt relaxed about seeing Tom or Craig. When they met Craig, it was a mixed experience. While Kate did connect with him this time, it wasn't as exciting as they hoped. Craig may have been honest about his situation, but he was heavier than his photos showed. Ken felt no jealousy here. In fact, Craig didn't compare to him in size at all. More importantly, Craig wasn't very skilled, and Kate didn't feel the same pleasure she had experienced with Tom. That night, once they were home, Ken and Kate aimed to reconnect. However, they both felt a bit let down. Sure, Ken got to see another man with Kate, but it didn't match the exciting vision he had in his mind. Still, he remembered Kate had agreed to try this once and now had done it twice. He wanted to make sure she was comfortable with everything. "Babe," he said, "that's 2 experiences now. You promised one, but you've done 2. How do you feel about it?" Kate turned to her husband. "I don't know," she replied with a serious tone. "I wish these meetings had lived up to your hopes. They weren't what I imagined either." Ken smiled slightly. "You didn't think you would have to deal with a guy who wasn't very exciting?" She chuckled. "He wasn't that bad." Ken raised an eyebrow, making her laugh again. "Okay, maybe he wasn't the best," she admitted. She then became serious again. "But really, what do you want to do next?" she asked. Ken paused and took a deep breath. He wondered how honest to be. He didn't want to upset Kate. She had been a great partner through it all, and he wanted her to know he appreciated everything. But he had a strong feeling that if he didn't speak up now, he might miss the chance to talk about Kate forever. "Sweetheart," he said carefully, "I love you. I really appreciate that you are willing to try this for me and to be open-minded. I know this isn't what you would usually pick." He chuckled lightly. "Of course, it hasn't all been bad for you. You seem to enjoy the attention from Tom." Kate blushed. "Stop it." Ken smiled broadly. "I'm not. I've never seen you so excited before. But," he paused, "that's not the point." "Look," he exclaimed, "I won't lie. I've been dreaming about sharing you again for years. While these last meetings weren't what I expected, I really enjoyed them. You filled a void I didn't know I had." He fell quiet for a moment. "Yes, I would love to continue this, but I would never want to make you feel pressured or uncomfortable." Kate took a moment to think. "You're right," she replied. "I wouldn't have chosen this. I was happy just being yours forever. I still am. That said, I would be lying if I said it wasn't fun. More than just the time with the other guys, though, that is exciting too. But I love how you look at me, how you're always touching me. In many ways, it feels like we've found that spark again." She glanced down, then back at her husband. "What I mean is, as long as we are both enjoying this, if you want to keep going, I'm in." Ken leaned over and kissed his wife warmly. "Thank you," he said softly. "That's wonderful." He smiled. "But maybe we shouldn't meet Craig again?" Kate laughed in agreement, and then went back to kissing him. The couple decided to play again in 4 weeks if they could find someone suitable. Kate's mom loved spending time with her grandkids and was happy to watch them regularly. Sticking to that 4-week schedule worked well for keeping everything safe for Kate, and it also felt like a good mix of excitement while keeping their normal lives intact. "If we don't find someone to meet this month," Ken mentioned, "it will be a 2-month gap between our playdates, especially with our vacation coming up." The family was planning a week at the beach next month, which would interfere with any chance to meet someone. They had agreed that the first weekend after Kate's period was the best time for a meeting. The following weekends were trickier than they wanted to risk, and the last weekend might cause issues if Kate's cycle changed on them. Sometimes, Ken thought that it might have been easier if Kate had chosen to get her tubes tied instead of him having surgery. "I understand," Kate replied. "So let's make sure something happens." They went back to the online forums with enthusiasm to find a new partner. Naturally, there were many applicants, but frustratingly, most either couldn't provide recent STD test results or didn't know how to have a simple conversation. Still, they received more responses than the previous month and managed to narrow down a few options that met their basic criteria and might be available within their preferred time frame. Eventually, they got the list down to 2 men who both claimed to be single. One was Brad, a sandy-haired man in his mid-40s who fit Kate's idea of an outdoorsy type. Even though Kate insisted she didn't have a type, Ken could easily see the pattern. In addition to matching her preferences, Brad was charming and easy to talk to. It was clear that Kate enjoyed their conversation. The other option was a man in his late 30s named Derek. Derek was confident and had a smooth way of speaking that made Kate feel a bit uncertain despite his polite demeanor. While she seemed comfortable with Brad, there was no strong connection with Derek. Although she might blush at some of his compliments, she appeared a little uneasy around him. Ken knew that if things were equal, he might have chosen Derek, fulfilling another desire with the interracial aspect. But he didn't just want to think about his own feelings. He wanted to ensure that Kate felt comfortable and happy too. He understood that it was better for both of them in the long run if Kate was at ease. So, a little reluctantly, he let Derek know that it wouldn't work out this time and moved ahead with plans for Brad. Derek took the news well, asking them to keep him in mind for the future and wishing them good luck. The week of the meeting with Brad arrived and, as expected, Kate's period started. On Monday, a day early once more. Even so, they had their usual 2 days of intimacy that didn't involve penetration, while looking forward to Saturday and meeting this new guy. In fact, even Kate, who usually didn't say much in the bedroom, started playfully teasing Ken about how she would soon be meeting someone new and what it might be like. It was enough to frustrate Ken completely. Unfortunately, their planned meeting would not happen. Saturday afternoon came, and just before Kate started getting ready, Ken noticed a notification on his phone. When Kate saw the worried look on her husband's face, she knew something was wrong. "Brad sent us a message," he said. "He says something has come up." Ken turned the phone so Kate could see the message. "A family emergency, it seems." The pretty brunette frowned. "Oh no! Is there a chance he can reschedule?" she asked. Ken typed a reply but didn't get an answer for over half an hour. Finally, Kate noticed her husband's new frown. "Did he reply?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. He didn't give any details, but he said he won't be free today or tonight, and he will be out of town after tomorrow for a week. So, it looks like we can't meet this weekend." Ken sighed. "That means we're out for this month, and next month as well. That's unfortunate." He thought about contacting Derek, but decided it might come off as hurtful to be seen as a backup option for when plans changed. Ken forced a small smile. "I guess that means it's just us for our date tonight. I may not be able to impress you like Tom, but I'll do my best to make it enjoyable." She smiled back at him. "I'll hold you to that." A few nights later, Ken found himself browsing some forums online. He made a post about how disappointing it was that their plans had fallen through at the last moment and how long it might be before they could try again. Several people responded, sharing their own struggles with similar situations. He also received a private message from Derek. "Hey man, sorry to hear your plans didn't work out. I wish you had reached out. I would have loved to meet both of you. There's no way I would have canceled on you and your lovely wife." Ken shook his head as he typed his response. "I thought about reaching out on Saturday, but it was such short notice. I didn't want to seem rude or make you feel like a backup." "No worries," Derek replied. "I understand. It's really hard to find people who care about safety like you and your wife do. Plus, I'm sure there are many who would love the chance to be with someone as wonderful as her. I'd be lucky to meet both of you if the opportunity comes up." Ken frowned. Ken couldn't help but feel tempted by the idea of meeting up, but it didn't seem practical. He typed out a quick message. "I'd love to, but I don't think it's going to work out. We'd need a babysitter again, and I'm not sure what Kate would think." Derek's response came quickly. "If I remember right, this is your last chance for a while before your vacation. Why don't you check with Kate? I'll get a hotel room for Saturday night. Trust me, I'll make it worth it. Let me know." Ken replied simply, "Okay." That night, as Ken and Kate lay in bed, they were close, sharing soft kisses. For the first time in a few days, Kate was being playful, adding a little flirty talk to the moment. As she kissed his neck, she whispered, "It's still too bad we couldn't make things work last weekend. I was really hoping we'd get a chance to fulfill your fantasy." Ken's interest piqued. "Oh?" he asked, curious about what she had in mind. Kate smiled, giving him another soft kiss. "I thought we might have had a fun time, letting you watch me with someone else like you've talked about. Seeing someone else with me, sharing that experience." She paused, her words clearly getting a reaction from Ken. "Who knows?" she added playfully. "Maybe we could have tried something different, something exciting." Ken couldn't help but respond, feeling a surge of excitement from her teasing words. Kate noticed, her voice soft and sweet. "You like that idea, don't you?" she asked, recognizing his reaction. "It's so tempting, isn't it? Letting things happen, being part of something different." She continued to playfully tease him, sensing how much it affected him. "It's probably a good thing we didn't have other plans," she said, smiling. "I don't know if I could have controlled myself." Ken's heart raced. He knew it was all just playful talk, but it had the desired effect. His mind told him to enjoy the moment and appreciate the connection they shared. Ken's logical side struggled to take control of the situation, but in that moment, his emotions were in charge. "I mean, we do have an option," Ken said, his voice uncertain. Kate raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean?" Ken hesitated before explaining. "I posted on Reddit to vent about the plans falling through last weekend. I was chatting with a few people, and it turns out others have had the same issue. Anyway," he paused, gathering his thoughts. "Derek saw the post. He reached out saying he wished we'd let him know when Brad backed out. He said he thinks you're amazing and offered to meet us this Saturday instead." As soon as the words left his mouth, Ken regretted them. He knew he had pushed too far, too quickly. He and Kate had agreed to limit any outside plans to specific times, and bringing this up put unnecessary pressure on her. When Kate's expression didn't change and her movements slowed, Ken braced himself for her to be upset. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, trying to explain. "I was just venting. I wasn't trying to set anything up without talking to you. I shouldn't have even considered his offer. I should have told him maybe we'd talk after vacation." Ken felt the weight of his mistake, realizing how selfish it had been to even entertain the idea without her full input. Kate stayed quiet for a moment, then said calmly, "No, I'm glad you told me. We agreed to always be honest with each other. I'm not sure if meeting him this weekend is the best idea, but I appreciate you being open about it." Ken was surprised by her response. Slowly, she resumed their conversation, considering the situation thoughtfully. She said, "Mom mentioned she didn't get to spend time with the kids last weekend like she wanted. She might be happy to watch them again, especially since we'll be away next month." Kate paused, her face serious. "But my period was a little early this month. Saturday night would be day 11, which isn't the highest risk, but it's still not the safest time. If we did meet him, we'd have to be really careful." Ken's heart raced, not expecting her to consider it seriously. He had thought she'd brush off the idea entirely, but instead, she was carefully weighing the possibility, discussing it with him openly. Though the conversation was about a new experience, what stood out most to Ken was the trust and honesty they had built in their relationship. The decision, whatever it might be, would be made together, with care and respect for one another. The idea of being intimate during a risky time in her cycle left Ken unsure how to respond. Kate lay down beside him, nuzzling his neck and speaking softly. She playfully teased him, but Ken was struggling to keep his thoughts straight. The teasing was intense, and it was clear they were pushing boundaries. Unable to resist any longer, Ken pulled her closer, and the moment between them escalated naturally. The rest of the week seemed to pass by quickly. Kate's mom was more than happy to watch the kids that weekend, and the children themselves were thrilled. They loved baking with their grandmother, especially decorating the cookies and sneaking bites of frosting. In the daylight, Ken and Kate talked seriously about the potential risks of their plans. Kate's cycle had always been predictable, and Saturday would be day 11. They knew they'd have to be careful. Ken suggested having Plan B on hand, just in case, but Kate was hesitant. She worried that having it available might lead them to make choices they wouldn't normally consider. Talking about these things was one thing, but taking real risks was entirely different. Before agreeing to meet Derek, Ken made sure everything was clear. He sent a message saying, "Derek, just so we're all on the same page, Kate isn't on any birth control, and this weekend isn't the best time for her. You need to be careful and make sure to follow what we've discussed." Derek responded quickly, assuring Ken, "I would never do anything to hurt you or Kate. You can trust me to respect your boundaries and do exactly as we've agreed." With that reassurance, they decided to meet Derek at a hotel bar out of town on Saturday evening. On Saturday afternoon, as they prepared for the evening, Kate asked Ken to make her a drink. "I'm feeling as nervous as I was the first time we met someone," she admitted. "I might need a little extra courage tonight." "I'm excited about tonight," she whispered playfully. "I've never gone out like this before." He chuckled and went to prepare a drink while his wife got ready. She wanted to dress fully before he saw her, so Ken kept himself busy until she called for him. When he finally walked into the room, he was amazed. Kate usually liked to wear just a little makeup, but tonight she had gone all out. She chose a bright red lipstick, added more blush and eye makeup than usual, and painted her nails to match. She wore stylish black boots, a fitted short black skirt, and a white blouse that showed just a hint of a red lace top underneath. She laughed as she noticed him looking at her outfit. "Yes, it's new," she said, "and yes, it all matches." He smiled, feeling a bit shy. "You look fantastic," Ken said. "Thank you," his wife replied. "I know you like the bold look, so I thought I'd give it a try. Do you like it?" "I really do. You look incredible," he said with enthusiasm. "Maybe I should keep you around more often." She laughed, and they went to say goodbye to the kids. Once they were outside, Kate unbuttoned another couple of buttons, showing more of the red lace. She looked at her husband's surprised face and giggled. "I thought you might prefer it this way, and I didn't want Mom's judgmental looks." She laughed again. "It feels like we're going out like teenagers." During the drive, they chatted easily. Kate took a sip from her drink, but seemed to take her time with it. She was nervous, fidgeting in her seat. At one point, she suddenly turned to her husband with a serious look. "Ken," she said, her voice a bit breathless, "I feel really excited. It's like I have butterflies in my stomach and I just want to feel connected." Ken was a little taken aback by her honesty and didn't know quite how to react. Isn't that a good thing?" he replied awkwardly. She gave a small smile, her eyes sparkling. "I guess so. I just hope tonight will be special for both of us. The feelings are so intense. It's like standing on the edge of something thrilling. I can't shake this feeling at all." She grinned again. "I'm not complaining. I just wanted to share that with you." By the time they arrived at the hotel, Kate had finished about half of her drink, enough to feel good, but not too much to lose her composure. Ken opened the car door for the brunette, who stood up and adjusted her skirt. She smiled and straightened her blouse. She looked down for a moment and then met her husband's gaze. "Do you think I look okay?" she asked. "Will he like how I look?" Ken smiled and replied, "You look amazing. If he doesn't like you, then he doesn't appreciate beauty." That was just what she needed to hear. She relaxed into her husband as they walked inside the bar to meet the man who would be helping him with his plan for the night. Inside, the hotel bar looked like many others they had seen. The bar itself was made of gray stone material and was fairly small. Neatly arranged tables surrounded the open room. The couple was surprised by how busy the place was. This ordinary bar had somehow become popular. It was easy to spot Derek. He was a tall, handsome man sitting alone at a table meant for four. He stood up when he saw Ken and Kate and greeted them with a big smile. He extended a firm handshake to Ken and then took Kate's hand, gently touching her knuckles with his lips. Kate tried to keep her smile neutral despite feeling a bit flustered. They took their seats across from Derek. He was impressive. Tall and strong-looking, he wore a well-fitted shirt that showed off his muscles. His head was clean-shaven, which Kate found appealing. As they settled in, it was clear that Derek was taking in Kate's appearance with interest. He maintained a broad grin, which grew even bigger as his gaze lingered for a moment. My, you are one stunning lady, aren't you, Kate?" Derek said openly, as if it were perfectly normal to compliment another man's wife in public. Thank you," Kate replied, feeling a little shy. Even though Derek was very clearly admiring her, Kate was not offended. In the past, she would have felt uncomfortable with men who had looked at her less openly. But tonight, she felt a surprising sense of excitement and found herself moving slightly in her seat at his words. "Please, let me get you both a drink," Derek offered smoothly as he signaled for a waitress. Ken ordered a beer, Kate chose a cocktail, and the three of them started talking. Derek was nice to be around. He sat comfortably and seemed sure of himself. He laughed easily at jokes and shared funny stories. But he also had a strong presence that added a lively energy to their chat. While he was polite, he often mentioned how attractive he found Kate, focusing on different features of hers. No matter what they were discussing, Derek would bring the conversation back to how appealing Kate was to him. This attention did not help Kate's feelings. She felt more excited with each drink she had throughout the evening. Derek's open interest in her only added to what she was feeling. She found herself shifting in her seat, trying to ease the sensations she was experiencing. Though she made an effort to engage in the conversation, her thoughts wandered to various tempting ideas. Derek's question broke her thoughts. Kate turned slightly red, realizing she had not been paying attention. "I'm sorry, what?" she replied. The tall man smiled. "I said that Ken mentioned you have never been with a black man before. Is that right?" Kate's eyes widened, and she quickly looked around the bar, but everyone else was busy talking, so it seemed no one was listening. Yes, that's true. I haven't been with many men, actually," she explained. "Ken and I have been married for a long time." Derek smiled at her embarrassment. "Trying new things is a big part of enjoying life, wouldn't you say?" he asked, as if talking about trying a new dish at a restaurant. "I promise to make this a great experience for both of you," he said. "I know this is something Ken has been thinking about too." Ken, also feeling a bit shy, joined in. "Yes, that's true," he confessed. "It is a big fantasy of mine." He raised his glass. "Here's to hoping we all have a memorable time." Kate and Derek lifted their drinks in agreement. After they finished their drinks, Derek spoke again. "I'm really enjoying this time with you, and it seems like there's a special connection here, don't you think?" Ken and Kate exchanged looks and then nodded at Derek, who grinned widely in response. Derek smiled warmly and said, "Looks like it's time we move on to the real reason we're here. Let me take care of the tab and we can head out." While Derek settled the bill, Kate excused herself to the restroom. Afterward, Derek walked with Ken and Kate to the parking lot to grab a small bag from their car. Together they followed him through the hotel lobby, past a clerk who paid no attention to them, and into the elevator. The ride to the 6th floor was quiet as Ken and Kate stood hand in hand behind Derek. The silence continued as they walked down the hallway to room 617, where Derek used his keycard to open the door. With a brief exchange of looks and a quick kiss, Ken and Kate followed him inside. Once in the room, Ken placed their bag beside the large king-sized bed. Derek turned to Kate and said with a smile, "Come over here, Kate. I want to see you." She glanced at Ken, who nodded and then moved toward Derek. He gently ran a finger along her cheek, down her jawline and along her neck, causing her to shiver. "You are absolutely stunning," he said softly. With a smile and a gentle touch, Derek leaned in and kissed Kate, catching her by surprise. She hesitated for a moment, but then relaxed, returning the kiss. His strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The moment was filled with quiet intensity, and Kate seemed to ease into the situation, feeling more comfortable with each passing second. Ken stood nearby, feeling a mixture of emotions. He had been nervous about how the evening would go and whether Kate would be comfortable. To his surprise, she seemed more at ease than he'd expected. This was a moment they'd both talked about, and now it was happening right in front of him, a blend of curiosity and anticipation filling the room. The situation felt almost surreal to Kate. She had felt on edge all day, her thoughts clouded by excitement and nerves. Though she had been uncertain about the idea of meeting someone new like this, her doubts seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of anticipation. She found herself swept up in the moment, overwhelmed by a mix of feelings she couldn't fully explain. As Derek leaned in closer, kissing her neck and gently holding her, Kate glanced at Ken, who was standing nearby. She gave him a quick smile before her focus shifted back and she let herself relax. Everything happening around her felt intense and strange, but she allowed herself to be in the moment, her earlier anxieties falling away. Derek's voice was soft as he encouraged her, speaking with a quiet confidence. Kate barely managed a reply, too caught up in the emotions running through her. Seeing his wife so at ease, Ken decided to join her. He stepped behind Kate and kissed her gently, his hands resting on her shoulders. "You look incredible," he whispered, clearly moved by the moment they were sharing. Kate responded with a soft sound, feeling comforted by Ken's presence. Together, Ken and Derek helped Kate out of her blouse, their actions careful and unhurried. Ken couldn't help but notice that another person was seeing her like this before him, but instead of feeling uneasy, he felt drawn even closer to the experience they were sharing. With her blouse now removed, Ken helped her step out of her skirt, leaving her in her red lace lingerie. Derek took off his own shirt, revealing a fit and athletic physique. Kate couldn't help but glance at him, impressed by his appearance, but she remained grounded in the shared experience between her and Ken. The three of them continued, their actions guided by the moment, with the underlying connection between Ken and Kate remaining at the heart of everything that happened. Derek caught Kate staring and flashed a big grin. "See something you like?" he teased with a chuckle. Kate's gaze was drawn to him, and she found herself momentarily overwhelmed. This felt like something out of a dream, something she wasn't quite sure was real. A mix of excitement and uncertainty ran through her mind, but she stayed present in the moment, feeling the intensity of everything happening around her. "It's really big," she said softly, almost in awe. Hesitantly, she reached out, curiosity getting the better of her. Derek smiled, clearly enjoying her reaction. Kate had never experienced anything quite like this before, and every moment felt new and unexpected. As she gently held his hand, her mind raced with thoughts she couldn't quite keep up with. Meanwhile, Ken, watching from nearby, decided to join them. He took off his clothes, his mind buzzing with emotions. This had been something they'd both talked about, but now that it was happening, he couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. He had always believed they fit together perfectly, and Kate had reassured him of that countless times. But this was a new situation, and it filled him with both excitement and unease. As things continued, Kate felt a brief flash of worry cross her mind. This wasn't the safest time in her cycle, and she suddenly realized the importance of being careful. It was a fleeting thought, but it reminded her of the need to stay grounded in the moment, even as the emotions around them swirled. The three of them were navigating this experience together, each feeling the weight of the moment in their own way, but also relying on the trust and communication that had brought them to this point. Kate held on to Derek, feeling overwhelmed by the situation unfolding before her. She glanced at her husband, Ken, who was watching her closely, filled with curiosity and uncertainty. The room felt charged with tension as the three of them shared this intense moment. Ken moved toward Kate, gently helping her out of her bra, freeing her completely. Derek, calm and composed, showed his appreciation, leaning in to kiss her softly. Kate let out a small sigh, placing her hand on his shoulder. Ken watched carefully, making sure that everything was done gently and respectfully. The three continued to interact in a delicate and mindful manner, with Kate responding to the soft touches and gestures of the moment. She was led back to the bed, and with a shy smile toward Ken, she settled in, feeling both nervous and excited. Derek, ever patient, moved beside her, making sure she was comfortable. The room was filled with quiet anticipation as everyone focused on what was happening. They all shared a connection, but it was handled with care and understanding. As the situation progressed, there was a sense of shared respect and emotional awareness. No one rushed, and every movement was slow, deliberate, and filled with care. The atmosphere remained focused on making sure that everyone felt safe and respected, reinforcing the bond between them. Ken and Kate were lying together, feeling a mix of emotions. Kate's uncertainty was clear in her voice. "Go slow," she said softly. "I'm not sure if I can handle it." Her breath was unsteady, and she looked at Derek with a hint of nervousness. "Please, just take it easy, okay?" Derek gave a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'll go slow. I promise I'll be gentle and only do what you're comfortable with," he said, keeping his tone calm and patient. With that, Kate and Ken relaxed slightly. Derek moved carefully, and everything proceeded in a calm and unhurried way. Kate shifted her body, trying to find a comfortable rhythm, her movements slow at first. After a few moments, she quietly asked for more. Derek paused for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. "You sure?" he asked, giving her the chance to take things at her own pace. Kate nodded, her voice a little stronger this time. Ken watched closely, his mind racing with mixed feelings, but he stayed close by, supporting his wife as best he could. As things progressed, the room filled with quiet sounds and soft words. Both Ken and Kate felt they were part of something they hadn't experienced before, though they remained focused on making sure everything felt right and comfortable. It was a moment of connection, but also one of respect and patience. No one rushed, and everything was handled with care and understanding. Kate's eyes were wide with emotion as she glanced at her husband, unsure of what was happening. There was a lot going on, and Ken, despite his nervousness, tried to remain composed. He felt conflicted, not sure how to handle the situation, but wanting to be supportive. He watched as Derek gently moved closer to Kate, and the room grew tense with anticipation. Derek maintained a calm, patient demeanor. "I'll take care of this from here," he said, signaling that it was time for Ken to step back. Ken moved away slightly, watching closely, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern. He wanted to ensure Kate was comfortable and safe throughout everything. Derek was careful and gentle, taking his time. Kate tensed for a moment, her face showing a little discomfort, but Derek paused to let her adjust. Slowly he continued, moving carefully and paying attention to her reactions. Kate took a deep breath, her face relaxing as she found her rhythm. There was a lot of emotion in the room, and it became clear that this was a significant moment for everyone. Ken stood by, watching, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He wanted to be part of the moment, but also wanted to ensure that Kate was okay. Derek kept his pace steady, making sure not to rush anything. He was respectful, ensuring that Kate felt comfortable the entire time. The atmosphere in the room was filled with intensity and emotion, but the focus remained on care, understanding, and respect. Each person was tuned in to one another, moving forward cautiously, ensuring that everyone involved felt comfortable and at ease. Despite the tension, the moment was handled with patience, leaving room for connection and mutual respect. Kate's voice grew louder with each passing moment, and her face showed a mix of emotions. Ken noticed a sudden change in her expression, concern flashing across her face. He was about to ask what was wrong when Kate threw her head back, letting out a deep, strained sound. It was clear she was overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment, and Ken watched, unsure of what to do. Derek, still calm and composed, continued with steady movements, aware of Kate's reactions. The room felt thick with tension, but there was also a sense of something important happening between them all. Kate's body responded to the situation in ways that were new to her, and she seemed both surprised and caught off guard by it. Ken stayed back, trying to process everything, and Derek remained gentle, moving at a pace that seemed to bring a sense of calm. Kate's breathing steadied as she adjusted, and the energy in the room shifted towards something more peaceful. As Derek shifted to a different position, things slowed down even further. Kate seemed to relax, letting out a soft moan, though her earlier surprise still lingered. Ken, standing nearby, could see the bond between everyone, though it was a complex moment for all involved. Derek, always considerate, asked Kate if she was okay, making sure she felt comfortable. Her voice, though tired, confirmed she was fine, and they continued to move carefully and slowly. The focus remained on mutual understanding and care, with everyone paying attention to each other's feelings. After some time, the intensity of the situation seemed to pass, and Kate's body finally relaxed completely. She whispered that she needed a break, clearly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Kate whispered a quiet plea, her exhaustion evident. Derek slowed down, adjusting his pace to a more gentle rhythm. He leaned in, kissing her softly while speaking in a calm voice. "How's it going? Feeling good?" he asked, even though the answer was clear. "Yes, it's good," Kate replied breathlessly, clearly overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Derek glanced at Ken. "You should tell your husband how you're feeling," he said with a small smile. Suddenly, Kate remembered Ken was there. Her eyes darted around the room until she met his gaze. Ken's expression showed nothing but support and care. She relaxed a little. "I'm sorry, Ken," she whispered. "I got lost in the moment." Ken moved closer, leaned down and kissed her on the forehead. "Don't apologize," he said gently. "I'm just glad you're enjoying yourself. It's amazing to see you this happy." Reassured by her husband's words, Kate smiled, but her focus soon shifted again as Derek subtly increased the rhythm. The energy in the room became more intense once more. Derek kept his tone playful and light as he spoke. "You know, there's something special about moments like these," he mused. "I love seeing someone completely lost in the experience." Kate was unable to respond, simply holding on to him, her breath growing quicker as Derek continued to move carefully, always mindful of her comfort. The connection between the three of them remained strong, with Ken watching closely, making sure his wife was still at ease. Kate's face reflected a mix of emotions, her hands gripping Derek's shoulders. The atmosphere was one of shared trust and care, with Derek ensuring everything stayed respectful and steady. Every moment felt deliberate, designed to make sure that everyone involved was connected and comfortable. Ken, still observing, thought about how different this was from anything they'd ever experienced before. He knew their relationship had always been solid, but this was a new level of intimacy, one they had never quite imagined. As the evening continued, it became clear that this wasn't just about excitement. It was about deep connection and understanding between all involved. Eventually, Kate's energy began to fade, and Derek slowed to a gentle stop, giving her the break she needed. There was a quiet sense of relief and satisfaction as the room calmed, everyone feeling content with how the evening had unfolded. Kate's body trembled as waves of intense emotion coursed through her. The sounds coming from her were unlike anything Ken had ever heard, expressions of overwhelming sensation. As the intensity eased, Kate seemed to relax for a moment, though Derek continued his steady, focused rhythm. It wasn't long before Kate began to respond again, her body slowly awakening to the moment once more. Ken, watching closely, noticed a shift in Derek's face as he spoke up. "I'm getting close," Derek said, his voice low but steady. Kate tried to speak but could barely form words. "No, not inside," she murmured, struggling to make herself clear. Derek gave a reassuring smile. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I remember what you asked." Kate's face softened with relief, knowing her request hadn't been forgotten. She relaxed, her fingers tracing the muscles on Derek's shoulders, letting herself focus on the moment again. Derek continued, his tone playful, though it held a teasing edge. "After all, we have to be careful." He spoke slowly, but Kate was too absorbed in the experience to reply. Ken stood nearby, watching with a mix of emotions. He noticed the way Derek looked at him briefly, but then kept his focus on Kate. Derek's voice cut through the moment, and Ken could sense that things were getting more intense. "You've trusted me this whole time," Derek said, his voice serious but calm, "and I've respected what you wanted." Kate said nothing, lost in the sensations, her face flushed. Derek slowed down, making sure to keep everything as respectful and careful as before. "We're almost at the end," he said quietly. Ken's heart raced, realizing how deeply involved they all were in this shared experience. Kate made a soft sound, and Ken wasn't sure what to think. Her expression was so intense, and he felt the tension rising in the room. He could sense how close they were to the end of this moment, but at the same time, he knew it was important to stay in control. Derek spoke again, this time with a little more urgency. "I have to stop soon," he said, ensuring that everything stayed in line with Kate's wishes. Kate responded with another soft sound, clearly overwhelmed. Ken felt the need to say something, feeling the weight of the moment. But he knew they were all in this together. As things slowed down, the tension began to ease, leaving the room filled with a sense of relief and calm. Ken felt an overwhelming need to reconnect with his wife, to ensure everything stayed within their boundaries. He wanted to remind Derek of their agreement, that he had to stop. But all Ken could do was watch, his mind racing with emotion as the situation unfolded before him. Derek, in the midst of it all, called out, "I need to stop now!" His voice held a hint of teasing, though his face showed the strain of restraint. Ken hoped Kate would help guide things back to what they had agreed on. Kate responded, her hands reaching out, and for a moment Ken was relieved, thinking she was going to pull away. But instead, she held Derek closer. Her legs wrapped around him instinctively, and Ken's breath caught in his throat as he realized she was embracing the moment. Derek, now lost in the intensity, let out a deep, triumphant sound, signaling that things were reaching their peak. The room was filled with tension and a flood of emotions as everything unfolded. Ken watched, feeling conflicted but also realizing the complexity of what was happening. Kate's body responded in ways she hadn't anticipated. Overwhelmed by everything, she felt a surge of sensation that she hadn't experienced before, a mixture of surprise and intensity. The moment was overwhelming, both emotionally and physically, as she felt everything hit her at once. A scream filled the air, a release of all the tension that had built up, and Kate's mind barely registered that the voice had come from her. She trembled, caught in the powerful emotions of the moment, as the room slowly calmed, leaving everyone in a state of quiet reflection. Kate's cries softened as she held on to Derek tightly, her body trembling with intensity. Her emotions were overwhelming, and she felt herself drifting in and out of the moment. Ken, watching from nearby, was overwhelmed too, but remained silent, caught up in his own whirlwind of feelings. He didn't say anything to stop what was happening, just observing in silence, his emotions swirling inside him. After what seemed like a long moment, Derek finally slowed down, giving Kate time to catch her breath. Instead of pulling away immediately, he stayed still, letting the moment settle. As Kate began to recover from the intense experience, Ken expected her to respond differently, but instead of pushing Derek away, she laughed softly, then leaned in and kissed him. "That was incredible," she said breathlessly, her voice filled with disbelief. "I've never experienced anything like that." Derek chuckled warmly. "You're one of a kind," he replied. His words were casual, but they carried a sense of admiration. Rather than feeling embarrassed by the exchange, Kate blushed slightly, but it was a blush of pride. She felt strong, confident, like she had just experienced something transformative. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," she said, her voice softer now. But then, a hint of worry crossed her face as she remembered Ken. Her expression changed, and she called out, "Ken?" Her voice held concern. "I'm right here," Ken replied, stepping closer so she could see him. She looked at him with uncertainty, clearly anxious about how he felt. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to ignore you. I just got caught up in everything." Ken smiled, his voice gentle. "It's okay," he reassured her. "That was incredible to watch. You were amazing." He leaned down and kissed her tenderly, and she responded with warmth, the tension between them melting away. Derek, sensing the need for privacy, sat back with a smile. "I'll give you two a moment," Derek said, stepping back as he carefully moved away, letting the couple share their moment of closeness. Ken moved closer to his wife, and she smiled at him, understanding how much this moment meant to both of them. Ken sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing as Derek left for the bathroom. The room was quiet, and Ken's eyes were fixed on his wife, still lying on the bed. Kate looked exhausted but calm, her expression unreadable. "You could get pregnant," Ken said softly, voicing the concern that had been lingering in his mind. Kate nodded, her tone steady. "Yes, it's possible," she agreed, as though they were discussing something ordinary. The weight of the situation hung in the air, and Ken found himself overwhelmed with mixed emotions. He looked at her, unsure of what to say next. Kate, sensing his hesitation, gave him a look filled with intensity. "Maybe you should help me clean up," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of suggestion. Ken's heart raced as he processed her words, realizing that this moment was unlike any fantasy they had shared before. Despite the surreal situation, Kate's calmness reassured him, and Ken felt a strange sense of determination as he moved closer to her. As he knelt by the bed, he hesitated for a moment, still trying to make sense of everything. But Kate's steady gaze encouraged him, and he knew she trusted him. With a deep breath, Ken leaned forward, focusing on the task at hand, as the weight of the moment slowly began to fade into something simpler, a shared experience between two people who understood each other deeply. The room remained quiet as Ken did his best to help, and despite the complexity of the situation, there was a strange sense of connection between them, a bond that went beyond words. Kate let out a deep groan as Ken continued his gentle efforts. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Her hands rested on Ken's head, guiding him as he worked, his focus entirely on her. Ken, despite the intensity of the moment, found himself still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. He could sense the connection between them as he continued, her reactions making it clear that she was fully present in the experience. As he focused on her, Kate responded by shifting her body, encouraging him with her movements. Suddenly, Derek's voice broke the moment. He had returned and watched them quietly for a moment before speaking. "Looks like you're really giving it your all," he said with a laugh, his tone casual but playful. "Good luck getting everything sorted out." Ken didn't respond, his focus entirely on Kate, whose body was tense with anticipation. Her breathing became more rapid, and Ken could feel her reactions intensify as he continued to gently care for her. It wasn't long before Kate's body trembled, on the edge of something deeper. As the moment built, Derek chuckled again from nearby. "Looks like she's close," he said softly, but Ken barely heard him. All his attention was on his wife, who was reaching her own breaking point, gripping his hair tightly and pulling him closer. Within moments, Kate reached her peak, her body shaking as she held on to Ken. The room was quiet except for the sound of her deep breaths as the intensity slowly faded, leaving both Ken and Kate feeling closer than ever. The moment between them had been complicated, but it was filled with an undeniable sense of connection and understanding. Ken could barely focus, still caught up in the intensity of the moment, when Kate let out a sudden cry. Her body tensed, and she released a deep breath, followed by a tremble that shook through her. Ken stayed close, supporting her as she calmed down. He noticed her body relax as the tension faded. The room was quiet except for their heavy breathing. Ken, overwhelmed with emotion, felt a need to reconnect with Kate, to feel close to her again. He moved closer, and with a gentle motion he embraced her, holding her tenderly. As they lay together, Ken couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. There was a new softness between them, a calmness. The warmth and closeness were comforting, and as they shared this quiet moment, it felt like something had shifted between them. Kate responded with soft sighs, her body resting against his. After a while, Kate looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Do you still love me?" she asked quietly, her voice full of uncertainty. Ken looked at her with complete sincerity. "Of course I do," he said gently. "I always have and I always will. You're amazing." A small smile touched Kate's lips, and she leaned into him, her worries fading. They lay there together, quiet and content, the moment filled with a deep connection that went beyond words. Eventually, Kate stood, her legs unsteady as she made her way to the bathroom. Ken watched her go, knowing she was tired after everything that had happened. He lay back, his mind still processing the intensity of the night, but a sense of peace had settled over him. Derek seemed relaxed on the far side of the bed, looking like he was napping a bit. When Ken's wife returned and lay down between the two men, Ken decided it was a good time to step out for a moment. When he came back, the scene was just as he left it. His wife and Derek looked comfortable. Derek's eyes were shut, and he was breathing steadily. Ken checked his phone. It was only a little past 10 p.m. With all the excitement earlier, it made sense everyone needed a break. He turned off the overhead light, which was tricky in a hotel room, and climbed back into bed, lying on his side facing his wife. She snuggled close until they were almost nose to nose. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Did I go too far? Was that everything you imagined?" He smiled, even with some worries in his mind. Ken thought it was best to deal with any concerns later. For now, they could just enjoy the moment. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he replied. "Actually, it was the best experience I've ever had. My dreams could never compare." She smiled back in the soft light. "I'm so happy to hear that. I know I got a bit carried away. With all the talk about fantasies, it just felt right, and then it went a little too far." Ken frowned slightly. "I understand what you're saying. It was incredible, but maybe not the safest choice. I couldn't believe you actually encouraged him like that. Her voice turned soft. I'm sorry, love. I don't know what happened. He put a finger gently on her lips. Hush, no need to apologize. It was amazing. I'll probably be thinking about that moment for a long time. Kate laughed lightly at his words. Look, we'll get some plan B tomorrow. I probably should have been more prepared. We learn as we go. Right now, let's just enjoy this, okay? Kate's smile brightened. I love you so much, she said sincerely as she leaned in for a kiss. The two enjoyed a sweet moment, kissing for the next few minutes while they caressed each other's faces and hair. It felt great to reconnect after everything that had happened in the hotel room. Ken's heart swelled with love for this special woman. Suddenly, she tensed, breaking his thoughts. What's wrong? He asked softly. He's touching me, Kate whispered. His hand is on my back. Are you okay? Ken asked. I can ask him to stop. No, she replied. I'm fine as long as you are. It's just a little surprising. As Ken lay beside Kate, he sensed the shift in the room. You touch me most nights before sleep, Kate said softly, but having two people in the bed at once is new. Ken smiled at her reply, reassured, and leaned in to kiss her again. At first the kiss was gentle, but he could feel Kate's energy building, her breathing growing quicker. Suddenly she gasped. What is it? Ken asked quietly. What's happening? Kate squirmed slightly. He's close to me, she whispered. I think he's getting ready again. Ken stayed still, realizing what was going on. He could feel the movements beside him, and he knew Derek was involved once more. Kate, seemingly unsure, leaned slightly toward Ken, but her body still reacted. He's going to try again, Ken whispered. And it seems like you're okay with that. Kate let out a soft sound but didn't respond directly, her body already reacting. Ken, sensing the moment, continued to comfort her, whispering gently, It's okay, just relax. As the situation unfolded, Ken stayed close, supporting his wife, noticing the mix of emotions on her face. Kate seemed caught between two worlds, partly with Ken, and partly in the moment with Derek. Ken could feel the tension building and stayed close to Kate, offering comfort as she navigated her emotions. Moments passed, and Kate's body began to tremble slightly, her breathing becoming more rapid. Ken held her hand, offering quiet reassurance, staying close to her. Time seemed to stretch on, and eventually, the intensity of the moment began to subside. As the room grew quieter, Kate regained her composure, whispering softly, That was overwhelming. Ken, still holding her close, nodded, understanding without needing to say much. The night had been an intense experience for both of them, but they were still together, still connected. Ken's mind raced with intense thoughts, and he decided to voice them, trying to make sense of what was happening. You're letting this happen, aren't you? He whispered softly to Kate, his voice full of curiosity. Kate moaned in response, her eyes wide as she looked at him, caught between different emotions. You're really enjoying this, Ken continued, his voice gentle but probing. It makes you feel something, doesn't it? Kate's face showed a mix of feelings, both desire and uncertainty, as the situation unfolded. Ken stayed close, feeling the intensity of the moment build. He could see the confusion and excitement in Kate's expression, but he also sensed that she was overwhelmed by everything happening around her. As the tension built, Kate became more and more immersed in the experience, her body responding to the moment. Suddenly, a wave of emotion overtook her, and she couldn't hold back any longer. Overwhelmed by the moment, she let out a cry of release, her body shaking with the intensity of it all. Ken stayed close, supporting her, feeling the weight of the night come crashing down on them both. In the aftermath, Derek seemed satisfied as well, stepping back to give the couple some space. Ken kissed Kate softly, feeling a deep sense of connection despite everything that had unfolded. Kate, exhausted but content, murmured softly in reply, resting her head against Ken's chest as the room finally grew quiet. The night had been full of emotions, but in the end, it was the bond between them that remained. The three of them eventually fell asleep where they lay, exhausted from the long night. Hours later, Ken stirred awake, feeling groggy and a bit disoriented. He glanced over at the clock on the nightstand 3:42 a.m. It was unusual for Ken to wake up in the middle of the night, especially since he was typically a deep sleeper. Still trying to figure out what had woken him, Ken realized that Kate was no longer lying next to him in the bed. He thought she might have gotten up to go to the bathroom, but as he became more aware of his surroundings, he noticed something else, a soft, repetitive sound nearby. Lying still and listening carefully, Ken heard a low voice break the silence. "That's nice," came Derek's deep voice. Kate quickly responded in a whisper, "Quiet. You'll wake him." Curiosity got the better of Ken, and he cautiously turned his head to see what was happening. In the dim light of the room, he could just make out the figures of Kate and Derek. Kate was no longer by his side, but instead positioned near Derek, her movements quiet but deliberate. Ken stayed silent, unsure of how to react, as the room filled with the soft sounds of the night. Kate raised herself onto her knees, determined and focused. She tried to shift her position carefully, trying to make things work as smoothly as possible. Despite her efforts, it seemed like her body was struggling with the situation. She adjusted herself, moving slightly to get comfortable, but it wasn't working at first. After a moment of shifting her hips, she managed to find a position that worked for her. "Oh, God," she whispered softly, her voice filled with relief and concentration. She took a deep breath, settling into the moment. Derek, noticing her relief, teased lightly. "You were looking for this, weren't you?" Kate nodded, out of breath. "Yes, I needed this," she replied. Derek, ever playful, continued, "More of what?" His tone was light, but there was an underlying challenge. Kate, feeling the pressure of the moment, gripped his wrists tightly. "I needed more, okay?" she finally admitted, her voice steady. Derek, satisfied with her answer, smiled, his expression calm and encouraging. They continued to move together, finding a rhythm that worked, while Ken, watching from the side, felt a mix of emotions. He was still processing everything, but couldn't deny that the moment was intense and raw. Kate's determination was clear, and the room filled with a quiet sense of tension as everything played out. Ken, despite his conflicted feelings, remained close, observing quietly. He couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to everything that was happening, even if it was overwhelming at times. As the night continued, the emotions in the room were complex, but they were all still part of it, working through it together in their own way. In the dim light, Kate looked lost in the moment, her head slowly turning side to side as she moved with steady determination. Her breathing was heavy, and Ken could see her focus entirely on the situation at hand. He felt a strong urge to join in, but decided to stay quiet, wanting to let her have this moment without making it obvious he was watching. For a while, Kate continued, her movements growing more unsteady as she struggled to maintain her composure. It became clear she was being overwhelmed by everything. Her quiet sounds turned into soft, scattered moans, showing just how deeply she was caught up in the experience. Suddenly, something shifted, and Kate pressed down harder, taking a deep breath as she fully settled into the moment. Her reaction was immediate, letting out a soft groan of relief and satisfaction. She took a moment to adjust before continuing, moving in a way that made it clear she was in control, completely focused on what she was doing. As time went on, Kate's energy intensified. She moved with purpose, no longer holding back, as if driven by her own determination. Every motion seemed more deliberate than the last, and she muttered quietly to herself, seemingly caught up in her own thoughts and sensations. The moment was intense, but Kate was completely immersed, her focus unshaken. The room was filled with a sense of urgency as she moved with increasing determination, her mind and body fully in sync with the experience unfolding before her. Kate moved with determination, fully focused on her actions, seemingly lost in the moment. Ken watched from nearby, his thoughts racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that things had escalated too far, but he was also deeply affected by the intensity of what he was witnessing. He knew they'd already taken precautions before, so what difference would one more instance make? Derek's voice broke through the tension. "You really want this, don't you?" he said, his tone serious. Kate, breathless and filled with emotion, nodded. "Please," she whispered. "I need this." Ken, overwhelmed by everything, could no longer just watch. He felt compelled to act, though he remained on the sidelines, still trying to process what was happening. Derek gripped Kate's hips, his voice deep as he spoke. "You're going to get everything you asked for," he said, pulling her close. The intensity in the room reached a peak as both Kate and Derek became fully immersed in the moment. Kate's face reflected a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction, her body trembling as she collapsed forward onto Derek's chest, breathing heavily. For a few minutes the room was quiet, the tension slowly fading. As Kate regained her composure, she turned to Ken with a look of uncertainty. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Ken, still processing everything, looked at her with a mix of emotions. "Come here," he said firmly, though his voice was calm. "You've been pretty wild tonight." For a brief moment, Kate seemed unsure of how Ken felt, but then his tone softened. "That was intense," he admitted, still catching his breath. "But what do we do now?" Kate, regaining her playful confidence, gave him a mischievous look. "Maybe you should help me clean up," she teased, her voice lighthearted. Ken, letting out a soft groan, couldn't resist the suggestion. Kate smiled, feeling the tension between them ease, and they both settled into the moment, the intensity of the night slowly giving way to a quieter connection between them. She worried for a moment that she had gone too far, but that worry faded when Ken leaned in closer. There was no pretending now. Ken lay back and Kate was leaning over him, feeling a rush of emotions. Gravity seemed to pull them together in a way that felt overwhelming. Ken could only swallow back his feelings as he focused on her. He could taste the mix of their connection, and the intensity was too much for him. Eventually, Kate settled herself more comfortably, resting close to Ken. He didn't have to think, he just acted, showing her affection and attention. As he did this, a thought crossed his mind. Kate seemed on the edge of something big, and it overwhelmed him. He felt a wave of feelings release within him, his voice muffled as he expressed his emotions for her. Feeling the moment build, Kate gave in to her feelings too, and the joy between them was bright. When they finally pulled apart, both felt a mixture of warmth and connection. Ken looked at Kate with a playful grin. "So, was that enough to keep you happy for the night? Are we good to rest now?" She blushed and laughed softly. "I guess so," she said with a hint of humor. Before long, all three of them drifted off to sleep again. Morning came, waking Derek first, but soon his movements stirred Ken and Kate as well. After a quick bit of small talk, Derek excused himself to the bathroom, and they could hear the shower running inside. Kate's mood was noticeably different from the night before. She avoided looking at Ken directly and busied herself with getting their clothes from the overnight bag and cleaning up the room. She slipped into a sunny dress and some comfortable underclothes. Following her lead, Ken put on clean boxers, a shirt, and some shorts. Noticing that Kate seemed a little shaken, Ken took the chance to talk to her while Derek was showering. "Hey, what's on your mind?" he asked gently. Kate looked up with her beautiful blue eyes, but quickly looked away. Her voice was soft and hesitant when she spoke. "Ken," she said quietly, "I'm embarrassed. I feel so ashamed. I can't believe how I acted, the things I said." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I didn't behave well. I'm truly sorry. It won't happen again." "Kate," Ken said firmly, "stop. Yes, you let loose last night. You crossed some lines and did some things that maybe weren't the best choices. But you had been drinking, and honestly, I didn't do much to stop it either. We'll pick up some Plan B today, and everything will be fine. Besides," he added, "that was the most exciting moment I have ever seen. I'm serious. You were like a dream come true." "So you still care about me?" she asked softly, a look of real worry on her face. Ken pulled her close and held her tight. "More than ever, sweetheart," he replied in a warm voice. "More than ever." They were so focused on each other that they didn't notice the water had stopped. Then Derek walked in wearing just a towel around his waist. He gave a low whistle. "Wow, you look great," he said, stepping closer to Kate. "No makeup, and even after a long night you still look amazing. Ken, you are one lucky guy," he exclaimed. Kate managed a faint smile, but quickly looked away. "Thank you," she said quietly as she packed away some clothes. She then turned to Ken. "Are you ready to go?" A puzzled look crossed Derek's face. "Why the hurry?" he asked, taking a step toward Kate. Well, the kids will be missing us, she replied. And my mom will likely be tired. Thank you for the evening, but we really should... Her words trailed off when she felt Derek's large hand on her hip. It would be a shame to leave before we said a proper goodbye, Derek suggested, his voice deep with unspoken words. Ken wasn't sure how to react. It was clear Derek wanted one last moment with his wife before they left. Ken could understand that, but Kate seemed uneasy. He would never want to push her into something she didn't want. Kate looked at Derek's hand on her hip. Derek, she said softly, we had a good time. We did, but I was drunk, and things got a bit wild. Her tone grew more confident. I don't think it's a good idea to do anything else this morning. Well, that decides it, Ken thought to himself. It was fun while it lasted. Derek's eyes narrowed, showing confusion and perhaps a bit of annoyance. He removed his hand from Kate's hip and looked at Ken as he continued to speak to her. So that's how you feel, Miss Kate? He asked, his tone cool and his expression serious as he glanced at Ken. Yes, thank you, she replied. That's how I feel. If you don't mind, we should... Derek interrupted her with a chuckle. The sparkle in his eyes had faded, but his face was hard to read. You know what I think? He asked. He placed his large hand on Kate's hip and turned her to face him. I think you're not being honest with yourself. That's what I think. Kate's blue eyes grew wide in surprise, and even though the tall man towered over her, she stood her ground. What do you mean? She said, her voice firm. I don't know what you expect, but... Listen, Derek said, raising his voice slightly. Kate was taken off guard and quieted down for a moment. I think you enjoyed yourself a lot more than you planned. As he spoke, he let go of the towel he was holding. From where I stand, it looks like you had an experience last night that surprised you. And that's okay. It's natural to feel uncertain about it. Kate blinked in shock and quickly glanced away, trying to collect her thoughts. See? Derek chuckled. You can't hide it. Don't give me excuses about being drunk. You might have had a drink at the start of the night, but it was hours later when you came to me. You seemed to know exactly what you wanted. Don't pretend that you didn't mean it when you reached out for more. Kate's mouth dropped open. She struggled to find her words, managing only to blush and glance nervously at her husband, whose look was unreadable. You feel worried, Derek continued. You're worried that your husband is upset, but I know he was happy last night. He seemed relaxed today. He clearly cares about you. I've seen husbands react differently, but he didn't. Derek kept going. You might think this means something bad about you. Every woman has desires waiting to be discovered. So why feel ashamed? You discovered something that brought you joy, and it seemed to make him happy too. You both will go home and enjoy each other for a long time while thinking about last night. He laughed lightly. You hear women complaining about not having great experiences often, but you had a wonderful night. Why would you consider that a bad thing? Kate stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Derek's confidence was undeniable, and his words hung in the air. Relax, he said calmly, as if everything was already decided. Kate's gaze dropped for a moment, and then she looked back at Derek, who wore a confident smirk. Here's what's going to happen, he said. I'm going to take control of this moment, and you're going to enjoy every bit of it. Do you understand? Kate was speechless. She glanced at Ken, who seemed to have a faint smile on his face. Confused, she took a step back, unsure of what to do. Yet despite the hesitation, neither she nor Ken voiced any objections. Derek, reading the room, stepped closer to her. He moved with purpose and reached out, gently pulling at the hem of her dress. Kate's breath caught as the moment unfolded. The situation felt surreal, and she was caught between the intensity of the moment and her own thoughts. Without thinking, Kate found herself responding to Derek's actions. She felt her hand being guided, and before she realized it, she was involved. She could feel the tension rise in the room, and her mind raced, wondering how everything had come to this. Derek, noticing her hesitation, continued to move with purpose. You're going to enjoy this, he said, keeping his voice low and steady. The room was filled with a strange sense of anticipation, and Kate found herself caught between uncertainty and the overwhelming intensity of the moment. Ken, watching silently, seemed to be processing everything in his own way. The situation continued to build, but no one spoke. The room was quiet except for the subtle sounds of movement as they all tried to understand what was happening. In the end, the moment wasn't about words or decisions. It was about the tension, the unspoken connection between everyone involved, and the way the room seemed to shift around them as they moved forward together. As Kate felt the pressure of a large hand guiding her, she hesitated briefly, making eye contact with Ken. Her voice wavered slightly as she asked, "Are you sure? Is this okay?" Ken smiled and nodded reassuringly. "Yes, everything's fine. We're all in this together." Kate, still unsure but trusting her husband's response, leaned forward as directed. Ken moved closer, and Kate turned her attention to him, trying to stay focused. However, before anything could progress further, she hesitated once more. "Please, not this time," she said quietly. "Just pull out, okay?" The moment continued, though Kate's request hung in the air. She tried to maintain her focus, but her mind raced with a mix of emotions. As things unfolded, the room was filled with quiet tension, with everyone trying to stay connected. Despite her earlier words, Kate found it increasingly hard to concentrate, overwhelmed by everything happening around her. The intensity of the situation grew, and she struggled to keep herself grounded. She asked again, trying to make sure her boundaries were understood. But the moment had already taken on a life of its own. As the situation reached its peak, Kate's thoughts became scattered, and it was difficult for her to focus on anything but the sensations she was feeling. The room remained filled with quiet sounds, a mixture of breath and tension, as everyone navigated through the intensity of the moment. Ken, observing closely, felt a mix of emotions, unsure of what to do or say. The night had taken them to a place none of them fully anticipated, but in the end, they were still together, working through the complicated emotions that came with it. The quiet in the room lingered, and eventually, the intensity began to ease. Kate took a deep breath, her mind slowly returning to the present. She looked at Ken with a hint of uncertainty, still processing everything that had happened. The night was long, but they were all still here, trying to make sense of it together. As the moment intensified, Kate felt overwhelmed, like her whole body was reacting all at once. Her senses blurred, and she let out a loud cry, losing control as she reached her breaking point. She wasn't fully aware of the sounds coming from her, and Ken could tell she was completely caught up in the experience. Derek, steady and calm, noticed her reaction and spoke softly, reassuring her. "That's it. Let it all out," he said, briefly glancing at Ken with a smirk. Ken, watching closely, was captivated by everything happening in front of him. The energy in the room had taken on a life of its own, and the atmosphere was charged with intensity. Kate, overwhelmed by it all, couldn't focus, and Ken stepped in, trying to help her through the moment. Kate, catching her breath, was fully lost in the experience, her body reacting instinctively. She could hardly form words as everything around her seemed to fade into the background. The connection between everyone in the room felt undeniable, but the intensity was almost too much to handle. Derek's voice broke through the haze once again, this time asking, "What do you think, Ken? Should I keep going?" Ken, his heart racing, could hardly think straight but managed to respond, his voice low and shaky. "I don't know," he said, "but I think she knows what she wants." Kate, still deeply immersed, made eye contact with Ken, and without words they seemed to understand each other. The room quieted for a moment, but the intensity lingered, with each of them connected in a shared experience that was both overwhelming and profound. As the night continued, the emotions remained high, and everyone involved navigated the experience together, trying to make sense of it all while staying in the moment. Ken and Derek were caught up in the intensity of the moment when Derek spoke with a grin. "Man, she's really into it, isn't she?" he said, watching Kate closely. Ken groaned in response, barely able to keep it together. "Yeah, she's fully lost in it," he admitted, his voice strained. The moment was overwhelming, with Kate visibly torn between holding back and giving in to the feelings taking over her. Her body shook, and it was clear she was on the edge of completely losing control. "She's about to give in," Derek said with certainty. "I can tell." Kate was struggling, trying to keep herself grounded, but the intensity was too much for her. She felt her thoughts slipping, and it was hard to hold on. All she wanted was for the moment to reach its peak, but she fought to keep herself in control. Her husband could sense her struggle and leaned in with a calm voice, offering reassurance. "It's your call," he said gently, trying to support her through the moment. "But I know what you really want deep down." That encouragement was all it took. Kate couldn't hold back any longer, and she gave in to the overwhelming emotions surging through her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of release. "I want this. I need it." Derek's confidence grew as he sensed the shift. He moved forward with determination, knowing they were all aligned. The wave of intensity washed over Kate as she finally let go, the tension in her body dissolving. For a moment, nothing else mattered but the connection they all shared. Once the tension eased, Ken was the first to move, gently shifting out from under Kate, who was left exhausted on the mattress. Derek calmly asked Ken for a pillow, and after receiving it, he slid it beneath Kate to help her rest more comfortably. As she began to stir, Derek spoke softly but firmly. "Not yet. Take your time to recover." Kate remained still, catching her breath as the room fell into a quiet calm, the intensity of the night slowly fading into a peaceful silence. Ken asked everyone to stay still for a moment while they got dressed. He wanted to enjoy how Kate looked. Derek picked up Kate's panties and pulled them on her. He didn't try to cover her completely. "This will help for the ride home," he said. But Ken understood that Derek was hoping to keep things as they were for a while. It seemed that Derek had a unique interest in trying to start a family with women. Ken thought that whatever had happened was done, and since they were going to stop at the pharmacy on the way home, it was best to go along with it. Derek made sure Kate stayed in a certain position for a while before saying he and Ken were ready for her to get up. Kate seemed okay, even though her legs were shaky after everything. "Watch out for the wet spot," Derek joked, pointing to a spot on the carpet. Kate blushed, but she didn't seem upset. After everyone was dressed, Derek shook hands with Ken and hugged Kate. He turned the hug into a quick kiss and gave her a gentle squeeze before saying goodbye. Once they were alone, Ken pulled Kate into a close embrace and shared a loving kiss before they walked out of the hotel holding hands. They planned to stop at a pharmacy on the way home. Kate really disliked hormonal medications and was worried they might make her feel ill. Still, they both understood it was important to take any necessary medicine soon. After all, it worked best if taken quickly after unprotected activities. With her known fertility and everything that had just happened, it made sense to be careful. However, their plans changed with a phone call. Kate's mother had stepped on a toy and fallen. Thankfully, she was all right, but she had hurt her wrist, which was now swollen. The situation meant that Ken had to drive home, drop Kate off to take care of the kids, pick up his mother-in-law, and take her to the emergency room. Since a hurt wrist wasn't life-threatening, they ended up waiting with many others who also needed help on a Sunday. Yes, the wrist was broken, but it was a clean break. They needed to wait for a proper splint and then go to the pharmacy for her medication. Ken felt awkward buying Plan B in front of his mother-in-law, who knew he couldn't have children anymore. After waiting for the prescription to be ready, he drove her home, and only then could he go to a pharmacy alone to get the medicine for Kate. Of course, the first pharmacy did not have it in stock, so Ken had to drive to another one. Altogether, it took him more than 6 hours before he finally returned home with the emergency contraceptive. When he got home, the kids were thrilled to see him. They showed him their frosted sprinkle cookies while Kate quietly slipped away to take her pill. "I was just cleaning up," Kate whispered to Ken after taking the medication. Ken tried to ignore his feelings and focus on the kids. The next few weeks were complete chaos. As expected, taking Plan B made Kate very sick for 2 days and extremely tired for another 2. She was also anxious since the medicine could affect her cycle. Kate decided to wait and see if her monthly visit would come to confirm everything was back to normal. During this time, Ken and Kate talked a lot about the events of that night with Derek. Kate realized she might not be as simple as she thought. She faced some feelings of sadness about not being able to have more children. It became clear that whatever was going on with her, she had some strong feelings about her experiences with Derek. Ken also mentioned that she could no longer deny her preferences, especially after that night. Derek's suggestion turned out to be correct. Discussing the night with him led to a deeper connection between Ken and Kate. They made a rule to limit their talks about it, as it seemed to take over their thoughts for a while. They discovered they enjoyed watching films together that featured some of the themes that had come up during their conversations. Before they knew it, it was time for their beach trip. While every parent knows that a beach trip with 4 kids can be tricky, they started their adventure with no chance to relax at all. At the check-in, they found out that the ceiling in one of the bathrooms had fallen into the bathtub because of a water leak. They had to stay in a smaller condo for 2 nights while their place was fixed. This meant that Mom and Dad didn't have their own bedroom, so they had no private time together. Kate started to feel a bit strange and worried. On Tuesday afternoon during their beach trip, she noticed something unusual with the toilet paper. It was pink. Thankfully, her period had arrived right on time. It turned out to be one of the lightest periods she could remember. Her pad didn't fill up too quickly, and the pink on the toilet paper faded after just 2 days. Luckily, her cramps were almost non-existent. Ken joked that maybe she should find a way to have lighter periods like this every month, but Kate remembered how bad she had felt after taking medicine before. As for feeling unwell, the beach trip had its challenges. The family went out for seafood one night. Kate teased her family because the kids ordered chicken fingers and Ken had a steak. She was the only one who actually ordered seafood at the beach restaurant. Unfortunately, it seemed like the kitchen wasn't careful with the fish. The next morning, Kate woke up feeling sick and dizzy. As she sat by the toilet, she complained about the cooks while Ken tried to help her feel better with every suggestion he could think of. Since she didn't have a fever, they decided it would be best to let her body recover naturally. Ken took the kids to build sandcastles while Kate dealt with her sickness. By lunchtime, she felt better after only a few rough episodes. The worst had passed. Even though she still felt a bit off, she decided the sickness was behind her. Ken praised her for being strong, and she joined the family for a fun rest of the day. That night, the kids went to bed early after a long day of playing in the sun. Even though it had been a few days since Kate and Ken had shared some private time together, Kate felt a little strange, but still found herself wanting that connection. The habit of spending time together had made her miss those moments when they didn't happen. That was something she never expected. While Ken really wanted to be close to Kate, he was also eager to show her affection in other ways. Ken loved moments like this, where he could focus entirely on making Kate feel amazing. As he kissed his way down her body, his eyes met hers before he leaned in, gently exploring her with his tongue. Kate shivered in response, completely lost in the sensation of his touch. She had needed this, and Ken could sense it. Before long, Kate's hands were tangled in his hair, guiding him to just the right spot. Ken was more than happy to oblige, focused and relentless, until he felt the tension in her body build and release as she experienced a powerful wave of pleasure. Kate let out a soft cry as her body trembled with the intensity of the moment, Ken's actions drawing out every ounce of her satisfaction. As she lay there catching her breath, Kate looked down at Ken. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice still shaky from the intensity of it all. Normally, this would be the point where Ken would move closer, but something was different this time. He wasn't moving, and his expression seemed off. "Ken?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Ken's gaze was distant, his mind clearly elsewhere, though he hadn't moved an inch. The connection between them, so deep a moment ago, felt distant now. "What's wrong?" she asked, the worry growing in her voice as she tried to understand what was happening. Ken took a deep breath, taking in the familiar, comforting scent that he had come to know so well. But something else was there, something he hadn't expected. A realization hit him, and the words came out in a quiet, almost hesitant tone. "Kate," he said, his voice uneven, "I think you're pregnant." The room grew still as the weight of his words sank in, a mixture of surprise and emotion passing between them. She makes a common mistake by counting the days from the day after her period to figure out her fertile days, but she should actually start counting from the first day of her period. I hint at this early in the story when Ken says he thought they would be safe that month. When Ken became a father for the 4th time, he believed it was a day they could take a chance, but it turned out he had likely made her pregnant during her most fertile time. With Derek, Kate noticed her period came a day early for a couple of months. She thought they met Derek on the 11th day of her cycle, which is risky. However, her miscalculation meant it was actually the 13th day, and it could extend to the 14th before they went home. I mentioned that she seemed more attracted than usual on the day they met, which happens often for women nearing ovulation. As the story explains, Plan B works by preventing ovulation. If an egg has already been released, Plan B won't help. Was she already pregnant the night before? Did she release an egg that morning? Did the delay in getting to the emergency room lead to Kate's situation? I'll let you think about that. If you're curious, no, Kate did not have her period. What she experienced was light bleeding known as implantation bleeding. This usually lasts for just a day or two, is very light, and can confuse some women because it happens around the time their period is expected. No, Kate did not have food poisoning. She was dealing with early signs of pregnancy. These unusual feelings are common, but after taking Plan B and having what she thought was a period, Kate was in denial and was eager to find another explanation. Most women start to feel morning sickness around 6 weeks of pregnancy, but it can begin as early as 4 weeks. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.